can't see anything on camera. Hey, guys.
Hey,
everybody.
Welcome to round two.
Welcome to round two. And our first technical difficulties, which is saying something, given that we've already done one full 7-hour broadcast of Game 1. Special treat brought to us by a combination of bad openings as white and not converting as black. No, I'm kidding. We had quite a long game yesterday, but we are excited and ready to rock here into Game 2. There you have it. Those were the results. Fabiano Caruana with the white pieces struggles out of the gate, but ultimately defends with tenacity and keeps the match even, Robert, as we head into Game 2. Yeah,
it was actually great defense by Fabiano Caruana. I posted on Twitter that I was concerned. I thought that was a win for Magnus. Of course, the game was a draw, but I thought that the draw, an easy draw with black, in fact, he was winning at certain points, was a win for Magnus's camp. Other people disagreed. I would love to see in the chat what people think, but I think as we go into Game 2 of the match, we did our homework, right? We saw the Magnus Carlsen's history against Fabiano Caruana with the white pieces. He beat him in Altibox Norway with white, and he's had actually great positions pretty much every game with the white pieces.
And again, we mentioned it yesterday, but it's more appropriate to mention now that Magnus is white again, the infamous shh from St. Louis, right? The Sinkfield Cup, where perhaps Magnus, in sort of the hometown of Fabiano Caruana at this year's Sinkfield Cup, was feeling a little bit of the love for Fabi, maybe slightly disrespected from the perspective, hey, I've been the champion for a few years now, and he's got some gamesmanship in him, and I like that part of Magnus, and so he threw a shush out to the crowd, but then ultimately failed to convert. Now, that was an E4 game, and different position than we're going to have today. And you and I made a bet yesterday about what move we'd see on move 1, and there you have it.
Yep, D4.
That's right.
0% surprised.
0% surprised.
Yeah, because, I mean, the reason why that I'm not surprised at all is because Fabiano Caruana plays a wonderful Petrov defense with the black pieces. And that's in the E4 opening. If we just go back to the start of the game, the moves will be coming underway. The opening stage is generally played quite quickly. Well, I should take that back. Yesterday, Fabiano Caruana did not play quick chess. So here, D4, knight f6, knight f3. Okay, so far we're in a standard opening.
I almost got my London call.
No.
I mean, almost.
If bishop f4 happened?
If bishop f4 happened, I would have literally called it. I said D4 and suggested that Magnus, being the pop culture aware world champion that we all love, is maybe going to play the London, given that that's where the match is being played. But okay, so much for that. I was wrong. He played C4.
Yeah, and I think here's the first moment where we should say taking on C4 is, generally speaking, not optimal for black at this point. And the reason why is queen A4 check as one option wins that pawn back. And as you'll note, black has given a pawn in the center for a white pawn that is more located on the queen side. So a stronger center for white would be ensured with that capture.
Yeah, so obviously we don't get that. We get instead E6, a traditional Queen's Gambit declined. And after knight C3, bishop E7, we are in nothing but a traditional Queen's Gambit decline. So for those of you who don't speak chess language, we may use the term QGD today, which is the short term for Queen's Gambit declined. And this is an opening that has been played as early as World Championship matches between Lasker and Steinitz, right? I mean, this goes way back. And part of the reason for that is that when you lead with the queen's pawn, typically you're getting a slightly more positional game. I hate defining things in chess as tactical and positional. It feels like elementary chess coach.
Yes, exactly.
But the what we'll say is that typically when the queen's pawn is leading the way, you get more pawns in the center because, simply put, the king doesn't directly defend his own pawn on an e-file, right? Whereas the queen does directly defend the pawn in front of her and indirectly defend via the tactics that Robert pointed out, the pawn directly next to her, right? Via these tactics of queen a4. So this is very fundamental, elementary, but I'm explaining it because I think it's important to understand that the whole nature of the theory that develops from the queen's pawn is going to be about what the pawns are trying to do to each other in the center and the pressure you're trying to exert. The pieces will come in support of the pawns. You're going for more space, whereas a king's pawn game could be defined as more tactics immediately amongst the minor pieces. Again, we're saying kind of generally, but even yesterday you saw an immediate minor piece exchange on move 3. Move 4 of the Rossalima Sicilian, and so this is going to be a little bit of a different game, and that doesn't mean a slower game. It just means a different type of tempo game than what we saw yesterday.
Yeah, for sure, and we'll see how the action develops from here. But definitely, I think Magnus is trying to do what he did yesterday, right? Get a position that's relatively neutral, slightly better for him. Okay, with the black pieces, you couldn't expect that. With the white pieces, you want to push for more. You don't just want to hold. You want to start pressing your opponent because you do have the first move of the game, which means you get to dictate the action. So,
that's right.
We'll see how this game develops from here.
We're waiting a little bit here for the relay. Some slight complications right now based on that, but gives me a chance to take a sip of my coffee. There we go. The opening moves come in fast, so sometimes in the beginning portions of these games, we will be backing up a little bit to make sure we're following the opening moves that the sides are playing. But Robert, where's your Chess.com mug?
I never got one, honestly. So you want to rub that in my face a little more? You
can get one in our merch store.
Oh well, okay.
Maybe not my problem. But
this is a you problem because now I'm jealous.
Maybe we'll get one for you by Monday.
Aw, what a
That.
sweetheart.
All right, so let's stay on the analysis here and back this thing up. We left our detailed review of what the Queen's Gambit decline is all about right here. Here, Magnus played bishop f4. Man, I really wanted my London. Not because I wanted to call my shots, but because I just would have been nice.
Yeah.
So bishop f4 played. Now, this is a slightly... Okay, it's not atypical. It's a very common move. But describe for everybody, if you will, the difference between the bishop being here versus what I would consider the more traditional move in the Queen's Gambit decline, that being the, if we back up to right here, that being something like bishop to g5, right, which exerts pressure on the knight and therefore indirectly increases white's pressure on the pawn here because of that knight's defense. So what's Magnus's philosophical goals in the opening by putting the bishop on f4?
Well, the bishop on g5 forever kind of encourages a trade, right? Because when that bishop's on g5, if that knight moves away from f6, there will be a trade of bishops. At some point, white, of course, can take that knight on f6 with the bishop and just trade there. So, for example, if you do play h6, white will retreat the bishop. You don't want to actually capture on f6 yet, but you can. It's not out of the question. And so the difference is the diagonal that bishop wants to be on. Because on f4, it's on a longer diagonal, whereas on g5, it's just sort of facing a knight, a bishop setup that's very solid. So at least the bishop on f4 has more room to work with. And so I think that's what Magnus is looking to do with the dark sword bishop.
I would define it as a slightly less forcing move, too, more flexible, right? We talked about the philosophies of these two guys in the sense of how they approach the opening. And I think that the main thing everyone knows about Magnus Carlsen is that he wants to develop as quickly as he can into a position that is not as forcing in terms of opening preparation in theory, right? So that's something that Magnus. Now again, we're really kind of stretching a little bit because of course bishop 4 is still theory, but it's something he wants to do to go down roads that are flexible as fast as possible. So okay, let's take everyone through the next few moves here.
Yeah, so after bishop f4, black castles, e3, c5, and here's sort of like a quote-unquote critical moment. I don't say it's like the biggest deal, but this is standard opening theory. So for those of you who are maybe not as familiar with this, the point is for black, you've gained some space. You can now bring your knight out, and instead of being in front of a pawn, and actually we can just put that on the board here, knight on c6, that blocks this pawn on c7. And this pawn being on c7 is a target because there's a bishop on f4, but it also means that you're a bit more cramped. Having pawns advance, let's say you go c5, which I wouldn't recommend right now, having that advanced pawn gains more space. So that's why black played c5 before going knight c6, just to gain some space and challenge in the center. And so white captured on c5 and says, okay, now let's figure this out. As Caruana responds with bishop takes c5, I can give black an isolated pawn, right, by taking on d5. The question is, do I want to? And that's always a dilemma for players in positions like this, because let's say I take back on d5, and you take back with the pawn on d5. That's an isolated pawn. I mentioned this several times yesterday. Pawn's best friend is?
A pawn.
There you go.
I tested you. Pawns like pawns.
I tested you, and you?
Just like
what'd you do?
Almost as when I tested you about what I taught you at that chess camp. You remember that so well, right?
I'm working on it. My memory's still coming back.
Shout out to Jackie, the Swede, who just gifted one of our buddies, John Urshel, a sub. Everyone hanging out in the chat. Just want you to know that the show started fast and furious today, but we see you all. We love you all following things already in both the Chess TV and the twitch.tv/chesschat. But yeah, so the isolated queen pawn is certainly something that is a very common type of dynamic structure from these queen's pawn games. One of the basic things to understand about this is that white will spend the rest of his time ganging up on this little guy, but also looking to surround the pawn by either making key minor piece trades or positioning pieces on these squares. And therefore, the person with the pawn pretty much wants to do the opposite, wants to keep as many pieces as you can on the board, on active and open squares, putting pressure on the center. And this is the type of game that it would be interesting to watch if it indeed occurs. You can see the live position directly to the left. It's not occurred yet, but still possible. I'm guessing we won't get an isolated queen pawn.
Yeah.
But possible, right?
Right.
And go ahead. What were you going to say?
I was just saying the difference now is if you take on d5, your knight on c3 is pinned.
Okay.
Right. So then the knight can capture back on d5 in the live game. So that's a critical distinction. But you're right. I mean, that flexibility that you were talking about with the open lines from the rooks, right? When there's an isolated pawn, it means that the files next to it have some open files for the rooks. And now black has to make more decisions in an opening like this. There are not the same open files. If you, instead of playing rook d8, captured on c4, you allow that bishop to develop in one move, and that's often very advantageous for white, because you want to wait until your opponent develop that bishop before you take there, because it costs them a move in the process.
Yeah, so both sides are sort of playing chicken here in the center, just to start the game from the perspective of you want to develop your pieces both for the current pawn structure you have, i.e. kind of the tension going on here, the staring contest, but also in anticipation of how that structure will change. And that's just a tip that everybody should keep in mind, because we all would like to think we have our openings prepared, that we're just recalling things that we studied previously, but even at the highest level, that's just not always the case, right? So you're developing plans, not pieces. I feel like a little bit of a broken record from yesterday's start of the game, but it's important, because it's really, as we look at the way these guys are developing much more quickly today, by the way, it feels like maybe as black, Fabiano not being caught quite as off guard as he was by Magnus' Sicilian, right? At this point, I feel like Fabiano is playing something he expected to get in this match. And
maybe he doesn't feel the pressure as much, because with the black pieces, you're generally speaking trying to defend, right? So you get in the game saying, my mindset is I'm going to try to hold and prevent my opponent from winning and make a draw myself. And perhaps with the white pieces, he just felt this urge, I need to play for a win here, and that with the first game of your first World Championship match, it's nerve-wracking. And I think here, the main line goes knight d2 for white. And we talked about this yesterday. Why move this knight a second time in the opening? And in fact, it was similar with black. The knight went from f6 to d7. Here, knight f3 to d2. But what's the point? That knight can jump over to b3 really quickly, forking the queen and the bishop. And in open space, bishops are more valuable than knights.
Right. That's a trade white would love to make.
Exactly. And let's instead of knight d2, we should talk about why b4 is not a good move.
Yeah.
b4 looks like a great fork, right? You're hitting queen, you're hitting bishop.
Fork emotes.
And pawns are less valuable than minor pieces, so you're actually sacrificing two pawns for a piece. The problem is after knight takes b4, pawn takes b4, and bishop takes b4, you have a deadly pin. And I think we have some pin emotes that we can start
and the kind of pin that you really don't want, because it's going to immediately start highlighting the fact that you've let your king in the center. Something like rook to c1 might seem like sufficient defense, but here comes another piece to attack it, and the knight on c3 is likely to be overwhelmed and have serious problems very quickly. So for those of you in the chat wondering, wait a second, hasn't the move b4 been on the docket here now? To note that it wasn't on the docket the move before, because as long as the rook was on a1, b4 would be met by a number of things, including knight takes b4, and this pawn is actually completely pinned down to the fact that the rook is undefended on a1. So basic tactics that I think we're kind of rushing through a little bit. I feel like we just need to take a breath. Everybody in chat, everybody, the royal we, let's all take a collective breath. Game 2 has begun. We have a new emote, Baybot, proving the myth that Chess Bay is indeed a robot. And she's there. What human being could possibly mod as many chats as she does, right? I mean, provide as much support to the chess community as she does, right? Philanthropy just coming out the yin-yang here on Twitch from Chess Bay. So, I mean, clearly she's not a human. She's a robot. And now the myth has been proved, and you can use that emote as you... or you know, we can adjust it if it's not her favorite. But there you go. But it's a robot. All right. Now, the move rook to d8 has been played. Still nothing yet from Magnus. So is it fair to say that now that Fabiano has played so quickly, saying, okay, I expected to get this one, Magnus is going to take a moment to decide what road he wants to go down as white? Yeah. How aggressively am I playing for a win here, and what are the best ways to do that? What does our theory tell us? Have these two guys had this position before?
Yeah, well, they've been in similar positions, absolutely. I know that Magnus has played this from the white side numerous times, and he had a game similar from the opening against Vishy Anand, where he did take on d5 instead of playing queen c2 just several months ago at the Sinkfield Cup in St. Louis. So both these players should be in their comfort zone, but what I'm being told by the time situation, just by, not that much time has been spent. Right? We were very early into the round, but Magnus, I do not think, was expecting this from Fabiano. That's what I'm seeing here.
Really? So roles reversed today?
Roles are reversed.
What tells you that? I mean, to me, I'm thinking that's not really that much time having been taken. Yes, it's a 10-minute edge on the clock for the American, but that's not really... I feel like the tempo of a couple quick moves and then, really a lot of time on one move by Fabiano was really indicative. I feel like he's been taking his time on a few moves here that's been slowly building up, maybe just being sure he's getting the line he wants. But tell me why you think I'm wrong about that.
Well, I'm just looking at how quickly Fabiano is playing, which means he's in his preparation still, and the fact that Magnus is sitting and thinking at this moment. I mean, if Magnus knew what he was doing, he generally is a very quick responder.
Right.
We saw it yesterday. Sometimes he moved too quickly.
Right.
But he tends, especially in the opening, to just sort of blitz it out so he can save his time for later in the game. The fact that he is down 10 minutes on the clock right now and not making his move seems to indicate to me that he's either debating between two options, or he's just not really in his comfort zone at the moment.
So let's analyze then here what we think might happen. So there's several ways to approach the position. There's a simple move like bishop e2.
Right.
Okay. Just get developed. Continue to stare down the fact that if you trade here, it's not the end of the world for me. I'm bringing my bishop to a more active square, and I'm preparing to get castled.
Right.
Then there's the move that's a little bit more theoretically well-known, I believe, and challenging. That's the move c takes d5. Is that a main move here?
Well, c takes d5, there's some issues with knight takes d5. It's definitely a possibility.
Okay, so not anymore. Now that the knight is pinned,
right.
c takes d5 is no longer something that you're really interested in doing, okay?
And I do want to point out also that... instead of rook d8, this might be where...
What caught Magnus off guard, right? The most theoretically popular move here was played by Hikaru Nakamura, and his...
Bishop e7. Bishop c.
I was going to say it's rook to e8.
No, the most popular move here is bishop retreat to e7.
Okay, so
Hikaru
bishop e7
also has played
is the most popular move.
Yes.
Rook to e8 was played by Hikaru Nakamura the last time he had this position with the black pieces against Magnus.
Right.
Okay.
And Nakamura's played that against Mamadjarov. He's played against Magnus.
Okay, so it
at
seems
the highest
to be a
level.
little bit of a... And one of the interesting things about Hikaru's move order versus the move bishop e7 is it actually opens up the f8 square for the bishop, which is something that is important because one of the reasons why black is retreating the bishop in the main line is even though we highlighted the fact that b4 isn't really a threat here for white, everyone, at some point it will be a fork that black has to watch out for.
Absolutely.
So it makes sense that, okay, I've served the purpose of actively challenging the center when I did on move 6 with c5. I've kind of equalized in terms of activity, and I've sort of called white's bluff a little bit, but at some point I am going to be worried about this move b4, so either a move that Hikaru plays rook e8, opening f8, or the most theoretically popular move, bishop e7, both make a lot of sense to just kind of say, I'm not going to sit here and continue to laugh in the face of danger of this.
Yeah.
So, okay, but again, the move rook d8 was the move played, and so rook d8 is not, it's not the mainline bishop e7, it's not Hikaru's bishop rook e8.
Right.
So maybe I'm now you've convinced me. So maybe this really is a move that is slightly catching Magnus off guard, and hence the thinking.
And to my knowledge, I don't see any games where Magnus had the white side of this, and in fact, it's a pretty rare move. So I can count several dozen games here, but not more than that, and nothing at the 2700 plus level.
Interesting.
So that's catching him off guard, and knight d2 is sort of a thematic response. It looks a bit strange, right? Removing your knight from the center, it cedes control of the e5 square over the d4 square, but things like b4 are now more possible. We mentioned the move knight b3.
We already mentioned knight b3, which would be a fork emote.
Right. And b4 is also a fork, and possible because you've actually blocked the pin on the diagonal. So by
so you're calling for knight d2 here for Magnus.
Yeah, and it also means d4 is not possible, and that's a move that you'd really like to play.
There's several reasons why it may not be possible. What would you prefer?
I think knight b3 is the move I would like.
Knight b3 is the simplest.
Right.
Okay.
And where the problem is the queen also can't might just get trapped because
actually, if you go here, I have this move.
100%.
Double fork. You ever seen a double rainbow?
Yes.
Sorry, I went never go full Pete Carroll.
Yeah, and also if you continue this on just a little bit, bishop b4 check looks like a great move. And after bishop b4 check, if I take it, it looks like queen takes b4 wins my knight on a4. But I can retreat my knight from b3 to d2, and I protect my knight.
Unleash the defense.
Yeah, it's pretty
Classic
nice.
Robert.
Pretty nice.
Yeah, so no, it's an important thing that we're recognizing a slight change of the guard. Now Magnus is being caught in opening preparation he didn't expect from Fabiano. Down on the clock for the first time in the match. Was he down on the clock for a single second in yesterday's game?
I don't think so.
Right?
Yeah,
I mean, those of you who are with us now, hopefully many of you will be with us all day. You'll probably remember that yesterday one of the ongoing storylines of the game was that not just that Fabiano didn't get anything with the white pieces, but his time management was really suspect and had us sort of making Tal Botvinnik references, the amazing book by Mikhail Tal about his experience of playing the world champion who felt a little rusty, worried about Fabiano having not played as much as Magnus heading into this event, Magnus just having played the European Club Cup. So that whole storyline I feel I'm reminding you of yesterday so that I can flip the script and say the opposite is happening here. Maybe we spoke too soon. Now Fabiano feels like he's right at home in opening preparation.
Yeah, it definitely seems that way, and he's doing the opposite. It really is the opposite of yesterday in terms of time spent and being caught off guard in the opening. I mean, the position, of course, is still totally fine for white. It's not like yesterday where Fabiano had a bad position with white pretty early. Right. Here, Magnus is totally fine. Knight d2, like I keep saying, is a good-looking move, but I think he's just taking a breath. I mean, that's my inclination, is that Magnus is obviously an extremely strong player. No questions. And at a moment like this...
Are you sure? Yeah, exactly.
I don't know. Sometimes you take the day off, like Bueller.
I love it.
But, he's in a position that he wasn't expecting, so he just needs to gather his bearings. And from here, just say, look, I'm in a position that I was not thinking I would get in.
Right.
Let me figure out. And actually, that's what Magnus' strength is. Usually, when he's in a position that's just neutral, but this isn't neutral because he knows that he's in Fabiano's preparation.
So he's gonna make sure he takes a second. I like your knight d2 as a thematic move, and I guess we're gonna wait and see whether or not Magnus agrees with it. But on move 10, as you can already see, we've got a bit of a think tank here for the Norwegian world champion. Let's remind you of who's going to be joining us as our special guest today. Coming up at some point in the next half an hour, I believe, we will have one of the most well-known and famous characters, or I don't even know how to describe, because he's kind of a celebrity idol in many ways, given that he was one of the main star subjects of the movie Searching for Bobby Fischer, but he was also one of the first coaches, a childhood chess coach of Fabiano Caruana, that being Bruce Pandolfini. As you can see right there, Bruce is very, very well known. Some people have mistakenly said that he taught Bobby Fischer chess. I think it's kind of just sort of the way that Bruce gained a lot of fame was actually commentating on the 1972 Fischer-Spassky match. It's where he kind of first gained a lot of his traction as a professional chess coach and commentator. Of course, he went on to write many dozens of chess books. He's an award-winning chess author, but he's with us today because he's also Fabiano Caruana's childhood coach, knows the young man very well.
Yep.
And we're going to catch up with Bruce and maybe chat him up a little bit about some of the things that he sees going on behind the scenes at times with Fabiano's, maybe the inner workings of what's going on in Fabiano's head, and I'm excited to catch up with him.
And I have to recommend that everyone goes online and Googles Bruce Pandolfini, Fabiano Caruana. It's New Yorker? There's
New Yorker.
Umbrella. Yeah.
Umbrella, yeah.
There's a famous photo.
We're not using it today because we don't want to use a photo we may not have rights to, but it's a great photo. It's like literally...
and they reenacted it, which is so great.
It's classic.
It's
right?
classic.
It's doing chess in the rain, because what else would you do? That's more important than going home and getting coverage from the rainfall, right? So, anyway, go ahead and Google that right now. It's well worth it, and we'll be catching up with Bruce here pretty soon. So, all right, rook d8. Still no response from Magnus.
Yeah, I don't like that sign. Really don't like that. And I think knight. I only can say it so many times that knight d2 should be played probably, but I'm not sure that Magnus is comfortable with the position that he's getting. Not that he's uncomfortable, but that he doesn't see the advantage. And that's a big problem for him, who Magnus was so close yesterday to winning that game. I'm the white pieces today. I outplayed him yesterday. I showed that I am in a pretty great form to get better positions against the number 2 player in the world. And so how do I actually turn that into some victories? And that was the frustration in the last World Championship in 2016, where many games he was getting an advantage against Karyakin, but all of those games early on, he was blowing his advantage. He wasn't able to convert into a victory. So he needs to get his act together right now. And I feel like right now I am sort of, speaking of flipping the script, yesterday I was pretty harsh about Caruana.
Openly critical toward your friend,
the
American team. And that's okay. That's what we're here to do, is be honest. We're not here to tell a biased story of any kind. So.
And here I'm being very critical of Magnus because he's just caught off guard. So, we'll see if he's able to make a move at some point, hopefully for his sake relatively quickly, because you can't go in the think tank, as we saw was a big problem for Fabiano yesterday.
Yep. Well, the chats are pretty popping. Just want to give a shout out. Adiata0405, Energy Drink Monster. Love that guy. I think I do. Just shout out to all the chat. Shout out to Chess Bay, all of our mods being so amazing and helpful in the Twitch chat. Get your hype going. We appreciate it. This is game 2 of the World Chess Championship. I feel like we're finally settling in here. It was a bit of a rush getting started here after the adrenaline dropping exhaustion of 7 hours game 1. Are they going to do that to us every day?
I hope not.
I hope not, because I got a soccer game to catch.
Yeah.
Like one day. No, the dad may be missing that soccer game. Hashtag I'll be paying for therapy later. Don't worry about it. But if dad doesn't make it to the soccer game, it means we're going to be here with all of you, entertaining you hopefully all day. You can see, again, if you're just getting here, thanks for being with us. It's only move 10. Move counter there right below my name tag. Hopefully that is something that adds a little bit of drama and suspense as we get into the time pressure stage and some clarity as to where we actually are in the game. But right now we're just sitting here kind of being a little critical of what is now a 20-minute time advantage for Fabiano Caruana, meaning we're critical of Magnus and what's he going to do? I mean, okay, let's start analyzing it, because at this point we might as well dive deep.
And we have more questions again about b4. We have discussed this, but for everyone just to kind of rephrase what happened, if you go b4 as white...
Yeah, let's make sure these tactics don't work.
Yeah, so b4, you take it with the knight.
You got a fork emote going, but takes, now fork flips the script on a pin.
Yep.
I have to defend the knight how? I have 2 moves, bishop e5 and rook c1.
Right. And after both moves, I believe I can respond in the same way with knight to e4.
Right. And now we're overwhelming a knight that needs to find defense quickly. So let's say rook c1 happens. You still haven't lost your piece back.
And what if I go f6?
Yeah, I was going to say, but now you're already in the realm of really, really panicking to make sure you can get this king out of the center and somehow keep your material. But black is safely just gonna make sure that's not possible. f6 threatens to get the bishop who's defending the knight. You go to d4, and am I just going to rush forward? Why not?
Yeah, absolutely.
e5. Bring it.
And at the start of this, black has 2 pawns for the sacrificed knight, and at best, white is going to have to sacrifice the knight back for 2 pawns. The king is still in the center. King is safe, and with being ahead in development with that pin right there on the knight and c3 still, it looks very, very difficult for...
there's no tactical way to try to get 2 for 1 here if you're white. Taking here, hoping that now you've undefended the knight, so that when this bishop is captured, you could go get the knight. The problem is, in the end, you'll be dropping your knight on c3 anyway, with check or any other way, and black is just much better. So everybody who's looking at this position and somehow suspicious, maybe Magnus does believe he can play b4, I'm pretty sure that's not the case. b4 is out of the question, as much as you would love to fork the queen and bishop. So that led us to considering a move like knight to d2, and as Robert pointed out, it's a breaking the principles retreat for those less experienced players thinking, wait, you're moving a piece twice in the opening before you've gotten this guy out of the center. Indeed, but it has several great ideas. One, to fork on b3. The other idea, to play b4 now, as now the position won't be nearly as dangerous given that the knight is not pinned to the king. So that's why we're kind of expecting knight d2. Oh, but a move we also mentioned earlier has now finally been played, which is just the simple bishop e2. I mentioned this because I thought, okay, it's the least flashy, least sexy move, but it says, you know what, I just got surprised by the move rook d8. I'm speaking as Magnus Carlsen, right? It's opening preparation. I'm not really that excited about challenging, so I play bishop e2, which has a very simple plan. I just want to get my king out of the center and maybe settle on a tiny edge that white should normally get in the structure. But look at Fabiano, he's flexing those muscles, saying, look, Magnus, you're not the only one who can play fast and show that he knows prep. Magnus, he's bringing it today. Fabiano's bringing the heat.
No, he's playing very quickly. He's in his preparation. And after knight e4, there's clear pressure on the c3 knight. So let's say I try to castle for white. Then I have to figure out, well, am I going to lose a pawn? Because if I castle kingside, you take my knight on c3.
Suddenly a3.
Yeah, a3 becomes very weak here.
I mean, I feel like I could take it. I mean,
you probably shouldn't take it just yet.
Okay. Queen takes would allow a rook to come over, and that's a trap lady.
Mm-hmm.
But bishop takes might allow a pin emote to go wild.
Yeah, that's not looking too pleasant.
But I think you made a great point that it doesn't even matter if you're taking the pawn because
structure.
This is not the prettiest sight, regardless.
Right. So I think instead of castling, perhaps in the live position, instead of castling, perhaps Magnus should try to take on d5 first. And by taking on d5, if you take on c3 now, I mean,
takes even.
I'm not loving it. I think that I don't really see any sort of large advantage here for white. I think black's just fine. I mean, if you take there,
you take with the queen or the pawn, but in any of these lines, the reason why we're kind of suspicious of this is because black will happily take back a pawn on d5, and who's better in the endgame but black, right?
Right.
We got structural problems, and I got 99 of them. 2 of them are Peshki.
And I think we should elaborate on this a little more, right?
Yep.
The a3 pawn is directly under attack, but it's not just about the immediate threat of that losing that pawn. Let's push that pawn to a4 just to get it safe.
Right.
And look at the structure. That pawn on d5 is isolated and under attack, but very easy to defend. You can just put your rooks on d8, you can put your bishop on e6. The good thing for white in this position is that d4 square, the knight will just jump there. And that's actually a very strong
That's kind
square.
of a key point, because if without that, as you said, the bishop will come to e6, and this c file, that's going to be the problem for white, is this weak pawn here.
And that's the thing about asymmetrical pawn structures, right? And in this case, you talked about this earlier, the isolated pawn means in the files next to it are open. The e file, if you put a rook on e8, it does nothing, right? The pawn on e3 is defended by another pawn. You're not threatening to take it. But a rook on c8, on the other hand, that pawn on c3 is clearly a
now
target.
We got something.
Exactly. So something like this would be suboptimal for white. Let's call it that. So I think maybe you have to castle. I think I want to keep the queens on the board.
I was going to say, I maybe... It's good that we illustrated that point, and of course we should be aware of all the potential roads here as much as we can. But I think probably pawn takes is maybe more principled under this idea that I would almost rather try to leave that pawn to the dynamic, fates here. Get castled, and okay, I don't think black can take it right away. Maybe I get a4 next move, and with the queens on the board, perhaps I have a chance at more active counterplay than just an endgame where black has a simple plan to gang up on my c3
And let's further show why bishop takes a3 is not a good move. So let's say bishop takes a3, rook a1, great move. It looks like queen c5. I'm getting out of the pin, I'm keeping my bishop protected, but count how many safe squares that bishop has. Right now, b4 is the only one because the pawn's pinned. So let's move our queen and attack the bishop at the same time with queen b3.
Love it.
And where's that bishop going?
Look at you busting up the basic chess counting.
Yeah.
Counting principles. Count attackers and defenders.
Yep.
And you'll be doing better at chess. Counter attackers and defenders, and lack of a punchline. Okay, so 94 was played.
So I think castling makes sense, just to keep the queens on the board and keep the dynamic. And the real question is, does white want to allow black to take on c4, or does white want to take on d5 himself, right? That's Magnus's choice. By taking on d5, you open that bishop on c8. You give it a kind of a new lease on life. By castling immediately, and then let's say knight takes c3, we just were talking pawn takes, and now pawn takes c4, black doesn't get stuck with an isolated pawn, but that bishop on c8 is not really getting out anytime soon.
You're trading activity for positional weaknesses,
and
right?
watch out. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go, no, you go ahead.
I said watch out for ideas like knight g5, right? Look at that king side.
Yeah.
It's totally left undefended, which means at some point I could start launching some pieces on that side of the board and perhaps making that king feel uncomfortable.
Okay. So perhaps Magnus will... well, obviously he's going to have to deal with what this knight e4 move is, and the fact that it came so quickly from his opponent. Fabiano having no shame and saying, hey, I prepped this position. I don't intend on using any time until you show me something I don't know. And that's good for Fabiano's confidence, but maybe Magnus is not in nearly as much of a detriment as we thought if he just follows forward with this simple castles.
Yeah, the real concern for me is not that white's position is bad, but that Fabiano knows exactly what he's doing.
Yeah.
The good news for Magnus is, even if Fabiano does exactly what he's doing, it's not like Magnus will be at a disadvantage. And unlike yesterday, which was more double-edged position, today's game doesn't really feel double-edged in that sense. There's no tactics, there are no true problems in white's camp that are so insurmountable that you're really concerned. So I think that Magnus is okay. He just needs to move more quickly. I understand he's been caught in Fabiano's preparation, and that's nerve-wracking, and he'll be upset. I'm sure in the post-game press conference he'll be like, well, we were in his preparation. I didn't know what I was doing, and I couldn't remember.
Yep.
And Fabiano played a good game. But right now, it's a time where instead of burning all your clock, you just start hurrying up a little bit and start making some moves.
Well, maybe he'll hear your advice. He seemed to be listening to you yesterday through the universe and ether somehow. No idea how.
Yeah.
But Needless Firestorm, that mug. That's right. Click on that button right below the Chess TV player. I see you in the Chess TV chat. Click on that merch button and get yourself a mug. Do it, baby. Well, we are waiting here for Magnus to show us whether he's going to speed up or struggle against Fabiano's prep. But somebody who's not struggling today nearly as much as he was yesterday to get in on the action as our on-site journalist is FIDE Master Mike Klein, who's going to join us, I believe, right now on the line. is Mike Klein, and hey, that rhymed. Mike, are you there?
Mike is on the mic, and yeah, they made fun of me at the press conference yesterday for not having a mic. I guess my name is not the real thing.
Well, I believe we actually misspelled your name, and we'll fix that. Don't worry about it. But we did that just to see if you were paying attention.
Yeah. Okay. I don't tune into this channel anyway.
Yeah, nobody watches this channel. It's not a big deal. Typos galore. But all right, so game 2 underway. A little bit of the game 1 nerves out of the way, I think, for the players. But how does the press box feel today as far as the vibe on site? Did your prediction come true? A lot of people bouncing after that. The hype and the flash of the opening ceremony, or still a lot of people on site? What's the vibe?
Well, a little bit less mainstream press because they often come for round 1 and get their photos and go home. But it being a Saturday, the crowds have swelled. In fact, I hear some people are getting a little bit disgruntled because it's 70 pounds to get a daily ticket. I think they sold too many. And they seem to have changed the terms and conditions. I have it on good authority that you're only allowed 30 minutes inside the actual viewing area. They're giving out time slots, even for a full price 70-pound ticket. Now, you're allowed to stay in the building and go to the other areas like the commentary room. But if I was paying 70 pounds, that's almost $100 US. I'd want a little more than 30 minutes. So developing story there.
Well, a good sign for chess in the sense that a physical chess event sold out as far as tickets go. Maybe a bad sign for the organizers and how that relates to keeping their customers happy, but we won't dive into that. What about the press as far as how you feel covering the story? Any thoughts or things to add about what were the reactions of the players after game 1? Magnus letting one maybe slip away. Fabiano taking a breath of fresh air that he didn't lose with the white pieces to start the match. Give us your thoughts on and highlight a little bit of what you covered in yesterday's news report so that everybody can go and check out your report from game 1.
Well, basically, both players had reasons to be happy and unhappy yesterday. It's whatever they wanted to take away from it. However, if you want to talk about the idea of, who feels like that they left more of a half point on the table, that was probably Magnus. Mm-hmm. I mean, so if you're Magnus, you could say, hey, I held easily as black. I was pressing for the last literally 100 moves of the game. I think Magnus cited his 16th move as his big mistake, knight g4, and the game went to move 115. So he was literally defending for 100 moves. So I think he takes away more of a positive vibe than Magnus. And if I'm Magnus, I'm thinking, man, this is like Karyakin 2.0.
Right.
In the sense that I just, I can't put away these guys in world championship matches. However, neither of them seemed that eager to leave the press conference. They answered questions calmly. I didn't see some of the anger or frustration that I've seen out of Magnus before. So it's up to their teams, I guess, to get them in the right mental framework. Now, one other ancillary point that I discussed in my news report yesterday was this idea of Magnus looking around for a move counter. Now, press is only allowed about 5 minutes inside the room to take pictures. And needless to say, I did not know to look for a move counter yesterday. My gaze does not go up into the ceiling when I'm trying to take pictures. But today I did look all around the room, and I can confirm that there is no move counter. So I'm not sure if that was part of the pre-match conditions, but it's not there. Now, one kind of quirky thing, sartorial thing that came up today, both players have some unique uniform choices going on. So Fabiano, over the last 2 days, has been wearing a St. Louis Chess Club branded jacket, but he arrived with pretty good amount of water on his shoulders. I don't know why they couldn't spring for an umbrella or a covered entrance for him. It is pouring out in London today. And Magnus, uncharacteristically, is wearing a light gray suit. He almost always wears either black or dark blue. So I thought they're all trying to change their uniform up to maybe feel like a new man or something. Interesting.
Well, we are actually showing the tweet that you sent out there about it may not be that much more money to help make sure their American man gets an umbrella the next time he wanders from his hotel over to the playing site. But
now the only member of his team that's made a physical appearance on site that I have seen has been Kristen Carilla. However, the Sinkfields did show up yesterday. And as some of you may know, Rex has done a lot of traveling in his life and famously kind of says he never wants to cross the ocean again. But he's made 2 exceptions in the 10 years that I've known him. One when he's on the FIDE ticket in 2014 at the Norway Olympiad. And of course, yesterday, because he came to the opening ceremony 2 days ago, and that's no secret. He wants an American world champion. his bank account suggests that as well. So he's here rooting on his hometown boy.
Mike, I have a quick question for you. That's a great point about the sync fields, but I have a question about Magnus's demeanor right now. He's deep in the think tank. He's clearly caught out of his element. What is the posture like? How does he seem? Is he reacting negatively to this sudden development in his game where Fabiano is catching him off guard in the opening?
Both players were leaning back in their chairs in a really comfortable, like, I'm settling in for, Lord of the Rings triple installment type of comfortable.
Extended edition.
But, one thing I'll say that's interesting about Magnus's posture is he got up from the board in the first, I would say, 5 moves of the game. I guess to use the restroom, that would make the most sense to me. So I don't know if that represented a little bit of nerves or whatever. And Fabiano was just kind of chilling there, leaning back in his chair. He looks very, very comfortable. So maybe you would say that, I know you guys have been talking about, obviously, Magnus has been bleeding his clock, which is a little bit uncharacteristic of him. So, just the sense he had to use the restroom in the first 5 minutes might suggest that, yeah, he's a little more nervous than Fabiano today.
Okay. Well, we did finally just get a move there, so Magnus deciding that getting the king out of the center is his best approach here against Fabiano's prep. And I don't know that we have many more questions other than to remind everybody where they can follow you and all the information you're bringing on site. There you have it, a correctly spelt Mike Klein, and at Chess Mike on Twitter. Go ahead and get at him, give him a follow, and engage with Mike, as he's got a lot of time on his hands as he waits for results.
And read his reports, of course.
And read his reports.
Yeah,
we've already shared a link right there in the chat if you're looking for daily news reports and coverage. Nobody does it better than Mike and Peter, and of course we also have analysis by Sam Shanklin in those news reports. But any parting thoughts before we let you go, as we've now just had 3 back-to-back moves? The action's heating up here in Game 2.
Yeah, I want to get you guys back to the action. In the World Championship with only 1 game, we read the tea leaves a lot. And you guys are the chess experts. I'm just the baby cub. But I will point out that when Magnus was interviewed on that Norwegian podcast about what he thought of stylistically and the differences between the two, he did say Fabiano values the center more than he does. And remember, back to Game 1, Fabiano is the one that had the 2 center pawns against a 0. I don't necessarily think that relates to more center control sometimes, and today he's got 2 center pawns to 1. So I know I'm reading a lot into this, but you got to talk about something in 6 hours, right?
Yeah, no, that's a great parting thought there, and we will definitely get into that, because I think that's kind of almost a fundamental. I don't mean that almost sounds like kind of a basic elementary description of where stylistic differences would be, because we would like to think that all good chess players value the center, but that's an interesting observation.
Yeah,
we'll definitely get into that and maybe look for some patterns to continue to play out in the match. So. All right, Mike. Well, thank you so much, man. We're going to let you get back to it. Enjoy the press room. Don't tweet too hard, and we'll catch up with you for Game 3.
Thanks, as always, for having me. Chess Mike on Twitter.
See you guys. All right. Well, wow. Let's back up this analysis board here in just a moment and talk about what we've seen. But we're going to take a quick break and get a couple things in line very, very fast. Promise we're going to be diving into the action very soon. So don't go anywhere. We're going to dive into what the last several moves tell us about both Fabiano still playing fast, clearly still in his prep, and what Magnus decided to do with castling and allow these doubled c-pawns. So don't go anywhere. We will be right back. here with Game 2 of the 2018 World Chess Championship. It's happening. The action is heating up, and we're going to jump right into it right now. Thank you to everyone that is with us, regardless of where you may be tuning in from. There you have the live position, still very, very equal, but the last few moves that were rattled off quickly to get us here are what we're going to dive into right now on the analysis board. So when Mike Klein joined us, Fabiano had just played the very, very quick-witted, I wanted to say, quick move 94.
Yeah.
Like I said, no shame about saying, hey, this is prep, and you better be ready to show that you're ready for my team's preparation. Magnus eventually castled, taking a lot of time, but this seemed like the logical move we were expecting. Fabiano still very quickly takes on c3 and then immediately plays h6. And if you're wondering how fast he's playing, look at the clock right there next to his profile picture right there. These players start with an hour and 40 minutes.
Yep.
He has an hour and 42 minutes right now. He has more time than that which he started with, so he is clearly just got something up his sleeve here.
Yeah, the great part about that is he's conserving his time for later in the game. That was a big problem yesterday. But sometimes I wonder if it's a little bit bad, because if you're so much in your preparation and somehow someone deviates from what you were expecting,
right,
it can either be they made a mistake and that's why they deviated from your expectations, or you start getting a little nervous that you don't remember or that you feel like you're not playing the right way. And in this position, the 8 move h6 was intended to stop what we had mentioned just before with knight to g5, because that threatens some deadly attack on the h7 square, right? There's no kingside protection for the black king with all the pieces over there on the queen side. So right now after h6, it's kind of a critical moment, because the pawn a3, for reasons we discussed before, but we should just say again, if you take with the queen on a3, rook a1 immediately
traps the queen.
Will trap the queen.
We'll go ahead and just show it.
Exactly. Rook a1 traps that queen. And if you take with the bishop, you simply will lose that bishop because rook a1, and you have a pin there, and the next move will be queen to b3, threatening to win
bishop
that
runs
bishop.
out of squares, yeah?
It is pinned. So h6 is a nice looking move, and I think white has two main options, two main considerations.
Okay.
One is a4, to get that pawn on a safe square protected by the queen. And it gains a little bit of space on the queen side. Not that that's super important just yet, but it's nice to get your pieces a little bit more advanced.
Peace of mind, too. No longer have a pawn hanging against the queen and bishop.
And another idea would be knight to d4. And by putting your knight just straight forward in the center, you at some point can threaten the exchange of knights in a moment that you find favorable. Black certainly does not want to take on d4.
Right, this would be the kind of move you never want to play,
right,
because you're helping your opponent undouble a weakness, right? And I think that sometimes players looking and getting trade happy don't make trades that don't have benefits.
And we were discussing how Fabiano loves that central control. That actually gives white the bigger center, because if you take there and the c pawn on c3 goes to d4, then you have the e, d, and c pawns, whereas black has a b pawn for your c pawn, so it's farther away over there on the queen side. That would be a nice central gain for white. So,
but I'll play. Okay, so we have two moves. I like what you threw at us there, a4 and knight d4. There's another move I think we should mention, because it's the trade that's kind of staring everyone in the face. That the other option is to take here. Now, probably the reason why white doesn't want to do this is because after the capture happens, even though you've given black a weak isolated pawn, that means a pawn that has no protection from other pawns, you've opened up the bishop on c8. And that development of that bishop is much more critical for black's position than anything you're going to get against this weak pawn. Partly because once that bishop gets out, let's say white makes some random move, suddenly this c8 square is open for the rook. Right. And that square hits your biggest weakness on the board, which is actually the c3 pawn. So we're talking a lot about pawns here, which is useful from the perspective that we want you to be aware that the peshki matter. Yep. Peshka matter. The little guys matter, and especially at this level, every plan is going to be developed around a weakness that is hard for your opponent to guard. I always told my students that the reason why you want to understand pawn structure is because they can't go back. Pawns can't go back. So in theory, a high-level plan to target a pawn weakness is something that your opponent can't really stop. It's just whether you execute, whether you deal with their threats, all those things, right? So understanding positional play and understanding that pawn weaknesses are what win games at these levels is very important, and that's really everything about where the players want to put their pieces. The last move we just saw by Magnus, your recommended a4, are all about making sure that nobody drops a peshka too early in the game.
Yeah, and that's an extremely good point, and also worth mentioning that in some lines, like in the Catalan opening, which is a different opening, white even sacrifices a pawn to keep that bishop on c8 stuck
Out.
behind
Yeah,
its pawn.
very, very good point.
Right? And by taking on d5, as Danny, you just elaborated on, a great point. By taking there, that bishop now can go to g4, e6. And maybe even potentially f5 if I can protect that square.
Right.
So that bishop, the development of that bishop often is more important in some openings than even having equal material, right? To keep that bishop stuck. Because if your pieces can't develop, it gives the other side more action and more...
An undeveloped piece is often a chain reaction. It's the old lady who swallowed the fly. If this guy doesn't get out, that means this guy doesn't get out, which means you don't have to deal with pressure here. So activity there is just very important, and so Magnus is going to try to stare down the tension here between the pawns as long as possible. Doesn't want to be forced to capture that pawn.
And same with Fabiano, right? If he takes on c4, let's just peek at something here. Bishop takes c4. I see in the future bishop a2, bishop b1, trying to checkmate that black king.
Now you're talking batteries.
Right?
You know I love those. Love that. And yeah, no, that's a great idea. But again, this would be the same structure we were highlighting, where white still has those weaknesses. But notice how much more difficult it is for black to get a rook here to actually be targeting that pawn, right? So I'll be interested to see how Fabiano reacts to a4, because we have, for the first time in today's game, Fabiano has crossed under the 1 hour 40-minute mark, meaning he has less time than he started with. So the increment of 30 seconds per move is a key part of the World Championship format. Something to understand, that as these players get under time pressure, they will gain 30 seconds on every move, which is why Fabiano had so much time there, for those wondering about that. So, all right, we'll see how... okay. Maybe not enough to think about for him to really go into the think tank. Quickly plays knight e7. What about this move is interesting to us? It's, you know what it does immediately? It opens up this e8 a4 diagonal,
right,
so that there's a threat of bishop d7, saying that your pawn may be on a4, but that doesn't mean I'm not going to target it.
And also defends the d5 square, so you don't have to take with the pawn necessarily. You can keep your pawn structure intact. Now, when I see that move, of course, bishop d7 comes to mind immediately. And in response, I think, well, maybe I should go rook to b1. Because I look at my two rooks, and we were talking about this a lot yesterday, how to kind of optimize the placement of your pieces. That rook on f1 here, before we go rook to d to b1, that rook on f1, where does that rook belong? You want this rook on some sort of semi or open file. But e1 is just standing behind all your pieces. So by playing rook to b1 here, you first put this rook on a semi-open file and say, if you go bishop d7, I'm going to take your b7 pawn.
I would happily trade such a weak pawn for a healthy pawn.
Absolutely.
And this is a key point, that as you develop your pieces or you develop plans against your opponent's positional weaknesses, make sure you do it in a way that doesn't allow them to trade their weaknesses for your healthy structure. So, okay, I like that move.
And not only that,
it also threatens
exactly.
rook d5.
So if you think, oh, I'm going to take on c4 and then put my knight on d5, if you get enough time. But no, rook b5 comes right away, and your queen and bishop are under attack.
Yep, and there's no way to save it, actually, because your pieces suddenly look like they planned this all along, and that queen runs out of squares. So, okay, so rook to b1 seems like a logical response.
I think bishop d7 is the best response, even if you... In an ideal world, you don't want to give up that pawn, but after rook takes b7, queen takes a4, for example, pieces are starting to get traded.
Transition,
yeah.
This is what we have, right?
You have a passer that could be a weakness or a strength, depending on the trajectory.
I don't know. I'm not sure that rook b1 would really need to be met by bishop to d7. My theory was, can I get away with a6? Just stop the b5 square from being under fire and slowly try to do things like you were suggesting. Maybe at some point I do want to get this knight to d5. That's a creative way to attack the c3 pawn, not the most direct way where you're developing pieces to the open files of the weaknesses, but I think that one idea of knight e7 is to look out for what's kind of a fork between the c3 pawn and the f4 bishop.
I guess I definitely see your point. You're trying to take and put the knight in d5. So I see what you're trying to do, and I'll go knight e5. That way, if you take me on c4, I'll take with my knight.
Oh.
And your queen is in big trouble.
Out of squares.
That's a trap lady.
That's a tactics trainer puzzle right there. That's like awkward queen traps. Okay. So I like knight e5.
And if you want to play move like f6, which I do not recommend, you're really compromising your king safety. The light squares around your king are suddenly very weak. Even knight to g6 here to offer that exchange of knights.
Or even knight d3.
Knight d3 maybe is an option as well. So a knight g4 perhaps sacrifices on that side of the board.
Okay.
So if you don't play f6, and you can't go bishop d7 very easy, I can always just take you on d7 if I want to. So.
Okay. So suddenly it seems like, despite the time advantage on the clock here for Fabiano, and the fact that Magnus certainly had to spend some time on the clock to get into this situation, that we are going to be indeed in for a dynamic middle game, which gives us a chance to take a breath and remind all of you that we are also here on social media, having fun with you throughout the day. Get involved using the hashtag Carlsen Caruana. And let's get to our daily question. We have a fun one today, a little bit different than yesterday's much more serious and obvious question, who was going to win the World Championship. Here, we recognize something about these names. One of our non-chess playing staff members like, hey, these guys both have car in their name. Which car would they be based on their chess style? So what we're doing now is giving away a 1-month Diamond membership. If you Photoshop them in that car, extra love for you, for sure. But get at us on Twitter with the daily question with just a fun one today. If these guys were a car based on their chess style, what would it be? We got a lot of people that love their cars almost as much as they love their kids.
Yep.
So some should have fun with that one today. So a fun one.
I have an easy answer for Carlsen.
Yeah?
What kind of commercial was he in?
That's right. I know that you were going to go that way.
Yeah.
Okay.
So they'll have to find that out. The rest they'll have to find for themselves at the research and
Right.
YouTube that commercial. But I feel like you got to go that way, right?
Okay. Well, you Google the commercial and know that Magnus has actually already had a sponsor deal with a certain car company. So go ahead and check that out. But maybe that'll lead us to obviously Fabiano's an Italian American, so maybe some sort of Italian model there.
So
I was gonna say
Maserati?
a Maserati.
Yeah? Okay.
That could be that would be sexy. I could
That
see
would be good.
Fabi
That'd
in
be
a
real
Maserati.
nice.
I could see Fabi in a Maserati.
But could you also see him in like a Tesla? Because he's got that millennial,
Yeah, who knows, right? All right, well, right now let's keep it on the chess. We've given you the daily question and invited you to get at us on Twitter with the hashtag. Have some fun with it, and don't take it too seriously. But let us know what you think these guys would be if they were a car. But all right, back to the position now. What we have is still a critical decision being made here by Carlsen. So you like Rook B1. Are there any other candidate moves that we think he's assessing here?
Perhaps 95.
Right away.
I don't love 95.
Yeah.
Because, I don't know, I feel like I'd rather do that if you provoke a weakness to the A6, but it's very forcing, right? If you play Rook B1, I'm more concerned, honestly, about Bishop D7. I'm being pretty frank here. After Rook B1, I'm much more reluctant to go into this endgame where we trade queens. So if after Rook, 95, you can't really play Bishop D7 as easily, but maybe you can play Bishop D6 and just retreat that bishop here. And now all of a sudden, maybe there are some threats with this E5 knight, the queen on A5 can come back to C7, and you're kind of regrouping.
Right.
And I don't know, I don't feel like necessarily White is getting what he wants out of this when that regrouping happens, because that pawn structure on the queen side is worse for White. You have the isolated A pawn, which can become a target. You have these double isolated C pawns, which are not ideal, though the C4 pawn, of course, can take on D5 at any moment. Though now with, if you take on D5 with the pawn, well, actually, maybe there's some tactics here. Now, I think a pawn takes D5, and if you take back with a knight, or the pawn, I still have knight C4.
Yeah, actually, that could be.
So you'd have to take with the pawn on D5 instead, but I still can go knight C4.
Now that would be a tactic. Laughing in the face of danger, you take me on C4, I win the bishop on D6, and probably a much better trade for White, given that Magnus would now have the bishop pair. The bishop might settle in on B4. Okay, so 95 looking like a potential candidate move to add to your suggestion of Rook to B1, Robert. And okay, I don't expect that Fabiano would fall for such a tactic, but that's kind of nice to note that there's so much dynamic tension whenever you have the lady so far out in the wilderness here, right? You always have to be careful of tactics that occur there, and that's an instructive one right there. Okay, well, I'm really curious here. Which one we'll have? 95, Rook to B1. I think that it needs to be one of those aggressive moves, given that Black's threat of Bishop D7 is kind of so straightforward, right? 97. This is exactly what Black is calling his shot here, right? They're going to be ganging up on the A4 pawn and getting rooks to the C file if you don't do something. So both Rook to B1 and 95 kind of prevent these moves in dynamic ways. So interesting to see if Magnus comes up with something different, but I think that's what we'll be expecting here.
Yeah, and oftentimes, just as a kind of point about the position, if your opponent is attacking you on the flank, you either want to have great control over the center or be attacking them on the other flank. So, for example, if the bishop's coming to D7 and it's A4, you would love to attack on the king side, but there's no real attack brewing there when you only have a bishop and a knight.
Yeah, I mean, you were highlighting earlier that there's no minor pieces over here defending the king. Unfortunately,
the pawn
for
structure.
White, there's no way to get over there.
Right.
Yep.
So it's looking pretty decent for Black thus far. Fabiano playing very quickly.
I mean, I like both your moves, knight e5 and rook b1 for Magnus. My biggest issue, again, comes back to the clock. I mean, we talked about time management yesterday and how much that could be something that played a part in Fabiano losing, where he almost did.
Yeah.
Here, if Magnus continues to get under time pressure himself, we might be having the same storyline reversed.
Though I'm not worried about his position. That's the essential difference. I think that White is totally fine here, where in the game yesterday, Fabiano was not fine. But you're absolutely right. You cannot hope to win when you're spending all your time in the early going.
And again, a lot of that is just because what we know about the world's best chess players is they don't take time on the clock to impress their coach or convince their parents that they're playing slowly, right? I mean, they take their time if and only when they need it.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the things that we have to be drawing attention to. Let's talk a little bit about what Mike said before he left, because I thought that was such a strange comment that maybe we can talk to Bruce Pandolfini about when he joins the show here in just a few moments. But the fact that he said Fabiano really values the center more than Magnus does, that seems weird to me to say. I mean, don't players at the highest level all value the center? What do you think he's suggesting there?
I think it means that Fabiano pays special attention to the center, where he feels most confident in his game when he has a strong center. So there are some openings, for example, the Grunfeld. And that for those of you who are know chess, or if you don't, you can Google the Grunfeld defense and see sort of the setup, that in the Grunfeld, it is White who controls the center, because you have a strong center. Black has fewer pawns there. And so that makes it sound like the Grunfeld would not be an ideal opening for Fabiano, if that's true about the center control, because you cede control of the center and give White the stronger center. So I think that choosing openings that suit your style are something that many players are not fully aware of how to do, and that's what seconds are for. Right? They know you better than you know you.
Right.
And that sounds funny, but that's the same way.
It's like knowing that even if a position is objectively good, like they don't want you to play it because they know you don't like it.
Right. And when I coach the U.S. women's national team, I have this exact conversation with the players. When I'm preparing them for a game, I say, you know what, here's something that I suggest, but if you don't feel comfortable, that's not the right choice. It may be good objectively, as in the broad sense of chess, but for you specifically, it's not a good choice because you may not feel comfortable in the resulting positions, in which case you won't play your best.
And I think we're going to come back to this because I think there's a lot of counter arguments to that as well, from the perspective that ultimately your goal as a chess player is to not allow your biases to affect your decision making, right? You need to be willing and able to play what the position demands, or what the match situation demands, right? You may not like this opening, but there may be times where, you know what, this is something I need to play to give myself the dynamic chances I need to win with Black or something like that. So I think this is definitely something to come back to, especially if the match continues to be a bit of a battle of personality or style. And so we'll keep our eyes on that one. But we still don't have a move right now. We do. Knight e5. Okay, there we go. And okay, so we get the second move you suggested here from Magnus, and what do you think we'll see as a response? We know we're not going to see bishop d6.
We might see it.
Somehow just joining us.
I don't know.
This is a tactic that I think you have to be very careful about because of this.
But I still think you can take on e5 even, and don't be too afraid. Yeah, to bishop e5, maybe even rook takes d5, and the pawn structure. The pawn structure is problematic for White in many of these lines. Again, the isolated pawns on the queen's side are not ideal. So it's going to remains to be seen. Potentially the good news is that Fabiano isn't so used to this position, and so he might be caught a little bit off guard. But again, if Black is doing fine, Black is doing absolutely fine. I think that Fabiano has a absolutely good position here. So
okay, well, we'll see if he's caught off guard, but what he does as far as dealing with a move that maybe catches him off guard is something that perhaps our guest, who's about to join us right now, can maybe provide a little bit of insight about. We mentioned earlier that we would be joined by American chess legend, Bruce Pandolfini, and we actually have Bruce on the line. For those of you who maybe missed that slideshow, Bruce is one of Fabiano's first ever chess coaches, his childhood chess coach. Most notably, I think most well known for his commentary on the 1972 Fischer-Spassky match, and then coaching Josh Waitzkin, which led to the movie Searching for Bobby Fischer, and I think a lot of confusion as to the fact that Bruce was actually Bobby Fischer's chess coach. We'll talk about that. And he's an award-winning chess author. Actually writes a lot online these days too, including for our own scholastic site, Chess.com. But we'll maybe talk a little bit about that with Bruce as he comes on the line right now. As soon as we have him there. Bruce, can you hear us?
Danny, I can.
You are. You can hear us.
Hey, Bruce.
Hey.
We're excited. Sorry for the long intro there. I wasn't sure if we had you on the line yet, so I wanted to remind everybody.
I enjoyed that.
Okay, I was going to say we wanted to remind everybody exactly who you are and all your many lists of accomplishments. So, but we know you're here because you've got a former student of yours playing on the biggest stage in the biggest match that is possible for a chess player. So how proud are you as a chess coach, and what is your current relationship with Fabiano? Any chance you caught up with him or gave him any advice before the match?
Oh, no. I wished him well, but I've seen him a couple of times over the last few years. We're on really good terms, and I'm very happy for him. This is extremely exciting. He's earned it. He deserves to be there, and I think he has very good chances.
So talk a little bit about the things that you know or maybe first recognize about Fabiano. I think that it's fascinating for people to get to know these players a little bit more, and given that you've known him since he was a very, very small boy, and when did you first recognize that maybe there was something special about this kid?
Well, he was taking a class at the Temple of Beth El Elohim, and a colleague of mine introduced me to him, Fabiano Caruana, and she said, this kid is really talented, and I took a look at him, and he really was. He was extremely focused. You could see he really loved chess, and of course you need that. And he was determined. I was very excited. I could see right away that this kid had tremendous potential. I think I sat with him and we analyzed the position for a bit, and I was very impressed. That was late Fab. I think it was almost 6, not quite.
Yeah.
And he then came over to the Berkeley Carroll School. Actually, he was there already. He took my chess class there, and we started seeing him in private sessions. And we'd see him maybe once or twice a week, and it took off from there. He had great analytic skills right from the start.
What do you mean by that? Analytic skills? Do you mean he calculated fast, or his analysis or his intuition for
look
positions?
At complex positions.
Okay, got it.
He could look at complex positions and take them fairly deeply. And he was a fighter. I always say to him, fight like Botvinnik. I think we saw something like that yesterday, maybe a heroic defense. Mm-hmm. He loves intricacy at the chessboard, and he was doing that right from the beginning.
Yeah.
He's just a real fighter. I'm very proud of him, of course.
How many of those puzzles you're saying you gave him that impressed you as far as his analytic skills did you give him actually at Washington Square Park? There's this famous photo of you and Fabiano from the New Yorker, and all of our chat, you can use the photo command. Just hit the exclamation photo there in the Twitch chat, and you will see a link to exactly what we're talking about. But you reenacted that photo with him as Fabiano has blown up over the last few years. And how much time did you actually spend at Washington Square with him?
Not as much as it implies. We were there. It's interesting because that day when the photo shoot was going on, he knew about it, of course, but he was totally engrossed in what he was doing over the chessboard.
Right.
Which was amazing. That's the kind of kid he was and the kind of young man he is. He's totally focused. That was a fun day. And when we reenacted it a few years ago, of course that was a staged thing. That was fun too.
Yeah. Well, what do you think about the current position? Let's dive into it here. I actually would love to get your thoughts on how Fabiano has rebounded this game from last game, right? I mean, Robin and I were I think naturally critical of how the match started, given that he clearly didn't get his best foot forward with the white pieces, and then, as you said, was stuck having to defend. Now he did defend, and perhaps that tenacity will be a great thing for him moving forward in the match to prove that he was able to do that, even if things go wrong. But here it feels like we have the opposite. Fabiano clearly in preparation, up more than 40 minutes right now on the clock over the world champion, and what does that tell you about how Fabiano feels about where the game is going?
Well, he seems very confident that he played so quickly. I'm not sure about the position after this last move, knight e5.
Yeah, Black played
Black
bishop to
the knight to the
d6.
center from c6, and this becomes possible.
Yeah.
It's still a little unclear to me, of course.
Can you see the live position?
Yeah, well, Black has played bishop d6.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's the last position?
Yep.
Yeah.
I think he's still okay.
Yeah.
I think he's.
We were analyzing these tactics with c takes d5, pointing out that possibly Black has to be very careful. For example, if Black just takes back, there's this interesting knight c4 discovery fork sort of thing going on with the pin on the d5 pawn. But
I'm starting to also
I think he has to take on e5. I think he has to get rid of the white knight.
Well, actually, something that I was just thinking about as you were discussing this, knight takes d5 might be possible because if there's knight c4, there's queen takes c3, and there's tactics flying all over the place.
Yeah.
So
and at the end of these lines, perhaps there's a bishop hanging on e2 with check, which if indeed Fabiano is still in preparation, that might be something that he indeed has in store. But I think you also make a great point, Bruce, that if takes d5, the other option, of course, is to take e5 intermezzo and then take back on d5. And here you could almost even just take with the pawn, finally kind of achieving the goal of opening up the bishop on c8, maybe to develop to e6 or f5, and then put a rook on c8, right?
Right.
So it looks like Fabiano will have a couple options, and I'd be curious to see if Magnus takes on d5, if he does play knight takes d5, because that would be real indicative of preparation in my mind.
Yes.
How talk a little bit about that. Like, one of the things that I think Fabiano has as a reputation, Bruce, is one of the hardest working chess players and one of the best prepared chess players of the elite, right? And not to say that Magnus doesn't work very hard, but I think Magnus is known for a different type of style, right? People often say he wants to get into the abyss of chess as quickly as possible, whereas I think Fabiano, he works so hard that he should and often does rely on preparation to get great positions out of the gate. Is that something you also noticed early on, that in addition to the talent, he just had a work ethic?
Absolutely. He wouldn't want to stop. He'd want to go on for hours and hours analyzing, playing more chess.
Does that ever get exhausting?
I mean, when he was 5 and 6.
I mean, does that just get exhausting as a chess coach, having so many talented students? I mean, can you be like, hey, can we go take a break now and get a sandwich or something? No.
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 A good chess coach, that's exactly what he wants.
Yeah.
He wants his student to love doing it. And those are the kids who are going to succeed. That's why we're doing this.
Yeah.
For students like that.
Yep.
Of course, we couldn't have predicted he'd be here right now. That would be impossible, but we know he'd be very good.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, Bruce, for everyone, there are people in the chat wondering, so how long did you work with Fabiano? From you said you met him at a very young age. How long was your working relationship with him?
Well, 2 years for sure, and then we went into a third year. We were also joined by a great coach, Grandmaster Miron Scherer, who, Robert, you're very familiar with as well.
Yeah.
Who's one of the best coaches in the world. He's terrific. And so 2 years solidly, and then I would act as a kind of mentor, advising him on various things. Although his father, Lou Caruana, was very up on all kinds of things and was a really good parent. Took him to the events, was there for him in every single sense. Fabiano had a good beginning in many ways. So,
were you involved at all? One of the things, those who know Fabiano's career and path to chess stardom, those who know it well know that at some point he made the decision to move out of the U.S. and move to Europe, really specifically for chess, so that Fabiano could be much closer to where the action is, right? I think that the chess culture in the U.S. continues to grow, but it's no secret that much more high-level events, much more top grandmasters playing all over Europe. And were you involved in that decision at all? Did that surprise you, or is that something that you would have kind of expected given, what you saw about the Caruana family and Fabiano's dedication?
Oh, I knew of it.
Okay.
I had conversations with Lou Caruana, but it was his decision and Fabiano's decision, his family's decision. But I knew of it happening. I thought it was a good idea at the time. I thought he could get greater chess culture, more activity, and be appreciated in that environment significantly better than here in the U.S. at the time.
Do you think
the U.S. has improved? We have lots of good players here now.
I was going to say, do you think he would be here now if he didn't move to Europe?
Probably not. I think that helped greatly.
Yeah.
Although Fabiano is so talented, who knows? How can we say?
Right.
Bruce, I have a question for you.
He could have done anything.
Bruce, I have a question for you that I just thought of. I mean, having a talented student such as Fabiano, and you're a very prolific author, you've written many books. How does a student like that impact your writing and your kind of your teaching methodology as it goes for your future students and for readers of your books?
Yeah, well, I would never recommend my books for my students. I just don't do that.
Yeah. I recommend your books to my students, so if that makes you feel better, but go ahead.
Thank you. I think it sharpens me that I have a player like that. It forces me to work harder, find good material, to be topical, even though I haven't played in years myself, to stay on top of new opening ideas. So I think it's good for me. It keeps me alive and alert and focused myself. So I need students like that. I revel in it.
Yeah. Well,
I think all coaches would feel that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And they often say the teacher learns more than the student, right? And I think in settings, especially where you have such a talented kid, I'm sure that that's often the case. And I want to ask you that as you look at the match, obviously there's everybody and their cousin has an opinion on who's going to win this thing and what both sides need to do in order to get their best chess. Knowing Fabiano as well as you do, but also, of course, as a chess fan like all of us, I'm sure you know and appreciate the genius of Magnus Carlsen. What do you think Fabiano needs to do in this match? And if you were, the match is over and you look back and Fabiano won, what do you think he did well, and what do you think he steered the games away from to avoid Magnus's best chess?
Well, that's a tough question to answer. Of course, Magnus is a chess genius. He's a very natural player. And I think you have to get him out of his element. Not that he's not a great analyst, of course he is. But you have to make him work very hard. And Fabiano has that ingrained in him to fight, to make his opponents work hard. Fight like Botvinnik.
Right.
That's the motto we instilled in him. And I think he does that. And I think that's the best way to try to bring Magnus down, and that is to make him work very hard. I think probably Magnus was very unhappy about yesterday's result. He felt he wasted a point. If you think back to the Fischer-Spassky match of Game 4, Spassky had Fischer beaten, and by not putting him away in Fischer's system, that really took a lot out of him. Mm-hmm. So I think if Magnus has a game or two like that, that improves where Magnus doesn't get the point that possibly he should have. That could bode very well for Fabiano.
Yeah, interesting. Okay. Well, I hope that your advice of fight like Botvinnik continues to be something that Fabiano hears in his head. Sometimes phrases like that from our coaches never leave us, and it can help. I'm not sure I have many more questions here, although I kind of just want to keep you here with us because, I don't know, your picture looks really good, and I just feel better that you're here. But Robert,
I hate my picture, but okay.
No, it looks great. It looks great. But what are you up to these days? I gave a small plug for our Scholastic site, and maybe we can bring up Bruce's accomplishments here again. But you're also writing for ChessKid.com at times, or you have been. But what is your current chess coach duties? What are you doing these days in the chess world?
Well, I still have a collection of really good students. I teach fairly regularly. Now that I'm 71, I probably should slow down. I don't intend to, though. So, yeah, I have a fairly active schedule. I still have some writing. Of course, I write for Chess Life. I'm all over the place.
Yeah.
I don't intend to stop. what else am I going to do after all these years?
Exactly, right? What do you, so, and you provided commentary for the Fischer-Spassky match, and then you were most well known, I think, at a certain time in your life for being the coach of Josh Waitzkin, and of course, I still believe the best movie ever made about chess, Searching for Bobby Fischer. I don't even think it's even close. I mean, as far as like a great movie, how involved were you in Ben Kingsley's portrayal of you as a chess coach, and especially the harshness that sometimes came across? That, I got to be honest, I had a hard time imagining that once I got to know you as a person, you ever kind of wiping all the pieces off the board in a legendary scene. But how much fun did you have in being involved in that process, and how do you feel Ben Kingsley did portraying you?
Well, obviously it's not an accurate portrayal, but it was within the character in the script. So
right.
He was fine. I really enjoyed working on the film. We did it for 3 months. We filmed in Toronto, New York, and L.A., and I was there for every single scene, just about. I think even I directed 2 second unit scenes, so that was a lot of fun. I created all the chess positions, some of which I wish I had done differently, of course. And I got to interact with the actors. It was a great time. I really enjoyed doing it. Yeah, it's my favorite chess film too.
Made for TV movie about Fabiano Caruana's career at some point, starring Bruce Pandolfini.
He deserves one.
He sure does, right? And maybe we could bring Ben Kingsley back to play you, and that could be a lot of fun. Just throwing it out there, because we got a lot of viewers right now, 35,000 people. Maybe someone out there's got got some strings, so maybe we can get that movie going.
You know, I'll just give you an interesting observation. At the time, we did a lot of fake chess for the actors. That is, they had to look like they played chess more than actually play chess, of course. And Max Pomerantz did so much fake chess preparation that he finished 6th in the Nationals that year.
That's right. I think I remember you telling me that story. For those who don't know, Max Pomerantz is the actor that played the young Josh Waitzkin. And, of course, did such an amazing job. Well, we still have you, which is fun, because we finally had a move on the board, which means we get to some excitement. And I'm excited to see how quickly Fabiano just snapped the pawn back with the knight, once again showing he's likely in preparation. And and Magnus is now almost an hour down on the clock. I mean, we talk so much about whether or not Magnus Carlsen would just shock the world by getting a victory with the black pieces. Are we going to be talking about the same storyline here a little bit?
I don't think that.
You don't think so?
I don't think that quite. Okay. We're in that territory yet, but I do think that Fabiano's going to. He's already equalized, and he has absolutely no problems in this position. And sort of how I would forecast this is bishop. If you play bishop f3, which is a natural move, so that way, if you play knight takes c3, it's a huge blunder, because now I play rook takes d6, and once you take back, I have knight c4. So that would be a tactic to avoid for black.
Okay.
So instead, after bishop f3, you can just take the bishop on f4.
Yeah.
And after pawn takes, you can continue taking on e5.
Simplify it out.
And you just simplify everything to the point where I can play bishop d7 and take on a4, and everything is, you'll lose b7, I'll take a4. I mean,
okay, so while we're definitely, I think, right to imply that Fabiano definitely still in preparation and should be very confident an hour on the clock, you don't feel like this is also a bad position, whereas yesterday Fabiano was really kind of worse as white. I mean, no denying that at some point in that game, Magnus, I think, probably had some wins. So you think at this point this is just going to be a really impressive show of good preparation, probably leading to just equality where Fabiano draws with ease?
Well, I think so, but as I continue to look at the position, I mean, I'm trying to find something magical for white, because you want to do that. And so something like knight takes f7, I don't have the engine, I don't know, but instead of bishop f3, just starting to go all sacrificial with knight takes f7.
Well, Magnus didn't do that. He's actually already played bishop f3 on the board.
Well, knight takes f7 certainly was interesting. I don't know for sure if it worked or not, but there were some pins in the d file up in the air, but I think bishop f3 is probably objectively the best move.
Bruce, what are your thoughts here as as we said, your childhood chess prodigy, now challenging on the highest stage that our species can generate? What do you think Fabiano needs to do here for the remainder of this game?
Well, I think if he can just get through some of the complications here, maybe he has to take on f4. White will be left with weakened pawns on the queen side and the everlasting targets.
Right.
Not that white maybe couldn't get counterplay along the queen-knight file, or
Can I just say I love that you just said the queen's knight file? That is awesome.
What was that?
I just love that you just said the Queen's Knight file. Whatever happened to descriptive, and can we bring the old days back?
If you look at Bobby Fischer's score sheets, what were they written in? Descriptive notation. That's how we grew up.
Yep. For those who don't know the Queen Knight file, in fact, so many of you may not, the starting position in original chess notation was not algebraic with the letters and numbers you see, but the Queen side, meaning the Queen's Knight file, would be the B file. And for those of us that speak old school chess, we know all that, and that's awesome. But all right, Bruce, I don't know what else to say besides thank you so much for this call. This has been a real treat, honestly.
Yeah, been enlightening.
Hey guys, you're doing a great job. Keep it up. I'm going to continue to follow. Very exciting game.
Well, I hope we don't distract your students too much. You texted me yesterday and said you had to pull the phone away from them. You're trying to teach them chess, and all they want to do is watch your former student contend for the title. So, thank you so much for joining us. Have a wonderful day there, afternoon there in New York, and we're going to take a quick break, everybody, right now as we let Bruce go, and as we come back, Robin and I are going to be diving into this position deeply, so don't go anywhere. Bye.
Chess.com is about playing. At any moment, there are thousands of people from around the world playing on Chess.com. So whether you're a total beginner or a grandmaster, you'll find a game quickly with someone at your level. You can play at any pace, from 1-minute bullet to 5-minute blitz to 60-minute games. Or you can play more relaxed games where you have several days to make your move. There are tournaments starting every few minutes, or you can play against our customizable coaching computer. Chess.com is for learning. Chess isn't just about playing, it's about getting better. Chess.com puts the best training tools at your fingertips. Sharpen your game with over 50,000 tactics puzzles. Improve your strategy with training videos by top grandmasters. Get instant feedback after your games with real-time computer analysis. Regardless of where you're at now, you can take your game to the next level. Chess.com is for sharing. Join the community where you can discuss chess ideas in the forums and follow the latest chess news. Or join a club with friends and play in a league against other clubs. You can find all this in your browser at home and at work, or on the go with your phone or tablet. Signing up is free and easy. So what are you waiting for? Enjoy your game.
And we are coming back, about to dive into what looks like is going to be a pretty exciting middle game here. But before we do, we've had a lot of action for those following us on Twitter right there, or using the hashtag ChessTV. Been some fun stuff going on. Here's a great tweet from Susan Polgar talking about Caruana and why he's a worthy challenger. He is very diligent with his training. I have known him since he was about 6 years old, when he started playing his first chess tournaments at the Chess Club in New York. So kind of similar, and a great kind of add-on to Bruce's thoughts about how dedicated and how much he clearly loved chess. This is probably about as good of a Twitter follow as you can do. If you like the chess world and appreciate laughing and humor, Dan at Anton Squared Me. You can see the traction there, 43 retweets, because who doesn't love seeing Hikaru going nuts? And obviously that's photoshopped. It's kind of what he does best. But you should definitely consider getting involved with him. There you see the hashtag Carlsen Caruana. As we said, to get involved in our contest of the daily question, use hashtag ChessTV. But the hashtag Carlsen Caruana, also where you're going to find Dan. And
that's amazing. That's
a haircut I could see Magnus sporting. Right?
That's so good. He should sport that.
I mean, that's legit right there, and that's about how a lot of people see him, as kind of a bad boy and bringing a lot of swagger to the game of chess, and that's kind of what we like about Magnus. What people may not like about Magnus is that he didn't play knight takes f7. As soon as Robert mentioned it, the chat started going nuts about it, so I don't think it works. Robert and I have actually had a few moments now to talk about knight takes f7 off camera, so we're going to analyze that for you. But before we come back to the fact that Magnus did play bishop f3, let's look at Robert's suggestion and the Twitch chat going nuts because they want us to analyze it.
Yeah, knight takes f7, of course, is a very interesting move, putting the knight on pre for a pawn. But if you take the knight with the king, well, I can take on the bishop on d6, and if you take back, I could probably... I don't know which pawn is better to push.
Right,
but
both are possible because the knight is pinned.
Exactly, there's a pinned knight, so I can go e4 or c4.
Let's say this one for now.
Yeah, although there may be some tactics as well with queen takes c3 potentially.
Right, and if one of the points, everyone, is that if a bunch of trades happen and the pin is punished, the problem is that black gets more than enough material at the end by taking that bishop with check, and now would have, some development issues temporarily, but a move like b6 would fix that, and black would have two minor pieces against a rook. So that's an interesting point as to why it may not work.
And if you throw a check in instead of e4, let's say you go bishop h5 check, and king to...
Maybe f8?
Maybe f8. If you go e4...
Although now there's even this interesting move, queen h7.
So go king g8. I don't want to...
Okay,
I don't want you to mate me.
Not even allow that, okay.
And if you go e4, now I have knight f4, and your bishop on h5 is going to be taken by either my queen or my knight, probably my queen, and I get those two minor pieces for the rook. I would say something that's also interesting after knight takes f7, and just for the record, the two minor pieces tend to be better than a rook.
Yes.
But king safety, of course, will be very important here. After king takes f7, immediately, maybe bishop takes h6 was another thought that is worthy of attention, because if you take on h6, now you're just getting your king blasted open with moves like bishop h5 check or queen h7 first, and your king's in huge trouble. So
probably the biggest issue, though, is that because it's not a forced move, I can sort of deal with my dysfunction here, put the bishop on f8, maybe make a defensive move, and now my knight is no longer pinned. Note, because the queen actually protects the rook, so a move like e4 would just be met by knight f6.
Right, and you can start with same idea with bishop f8. You can start with knight f6 back to start retreating your pieces towards your king to shore up that side of the board.
Okay, so as exciting as it was, we are confirming to all of you that knight takes f7 was not a missed opportunity by the world champion.
Although I see some chat here, knight takes f7 was a good move according to Stockfish.
Well, first of all, we don't have Stockfish in front of us. Second of all, have you ever heard of the Twitch chatter who cried Stockfish? There's a story about this one Twitch chatter who cried Stockfish so many times in the chat that he began to be ignored by the host till eventually when he actually cried stockfish, and he was right, and the Twitch host continued to ignore him like I'm about to do.
You're a great dad.
I like to use the boy who cried wolf analogy many times, and I just did it right there, and to hopefully teach that Twitch chatter a lesson. So let's move back. Bishop f3 was played, and now we're going to dive into the analysis of the live position, because I think that this is so far been kind of Fabiano's game, not necessarily to win, but to draw. If you look at the clocks, for those of you who may be just joining us, you can see that a big part of the story here is Fabiano clearly in preparation, Magnus not, and now we're about to see the line that we predicted just a few moments ago with our special guest host, Bruce Pandolfini. Knight takes f4 has been played. I anticipate we're actually going to see the move you suggested, maybe another capture.
Yeah.
And then just go to an endgame where black probably has very, very easy drawing chances.
Well, I would say that at first glance, you say, well, why would I give up my bishop for a knight? Because we keep talking about these bishop advantages over knight.
Yeah.
The issue here is that bishop on d6 doesn't really have a great square to go to, and more importantly, look at that queenside development for black.
Yeah.
Or I should say the lack of queenside development.
Exactly, and it's only getting worse now that the bishop has found this diagonal.
Right. The bishop's there, the knight e5 is very strong. Maybe I'll try to double my rooks in the d file by playing rook d4 and rook to d1. Knight c4 is an option. Things like this everywhere.
So one of those times when you have to kind of compromise your normal chess fundamental goals, that you want to keep the bishop pair for the actual reality of the situation, which is that white just has too many threats between knight c4 and doubling rooks, and that's exactly why we're actually seeing moves very quickly that we predicted. Bishop takes e5 has been played, and that's our current position. Magnus is just going to have to choose between whether he takes on d8 first or takes on e5 first.
Right.
He can do both, because one thing just to note for everyone is that if he takes here, there is no idea where the queen gobbles this pawn. There's no multiverse where that happens, because if you trade and then try to do it, I'm still delivering the goods over here on the back rank. That's a problem. So note that lack of development here is going to prevent black from winning the pawn, so I think Magnus taking a moment to decide, do I want to take here and kind of force Fabiano to figure out development, or am I going to kind of force the issue by trading on the d file and then capturing back? In both cases, we highlighted with Bruce that the advantage for black in this transition is that white has weak pawns. But let's not underestimate the potential advantage for white, right? White is ahead in development.
Yep.
There's going to be some quick moves coming like rook d1, and if white can do something before black figures out how to get developed here, I've lost games like this where you think you're transitioning into something, you're simplifying.
Right.
Suddenly the only open file on the board becomes the story. And if you can't get developed quickly enough to challenge it, you can be much worse in an endgame.
And absolutely. For example, a move which should not be played, and I love making moves this, king h8. Just a totally useless move. If you do that, rook to d1 comes, and after queen, let's say c7, I can even go queen d2 or queen d3. One of these moves saying your bishop's not getting out. And again, you could take this pawn on e5, but that pawn is way less important than the fact that you can't develop your pieces.
Right.
And I'm seizing the momentum with the white pieces in a line like this.
So we don't anticipate this exactly to happen, but that's partly why in this position I think Magnus is taking his time. And to elaborate a little bit on the criticalness of this open file point, because it's instructive, I think, for most of the levels of the majority of those watching us, that the open files in chess, and in this case I'll make it further, both the open file here and the open diagonal here are so important, because when you have less pieces on the board, control over the very few open lines, I call them the highways of the chessboard, becomes more valuable, right? When there's a lot of pieces on the board, you don't notice as much over the fact that this one open file could decide the game. And I often have taught my students and use this phrase that open files are like commodities, right? And what governs the world of economics really is supply and demand. And the less open files you have, the more valuable they are, right? Mm-hmm. And so think of that in your own chess games, that you really can't get yourself in a position where if there's only, put it this way, if the A file were already open right here too, you wouldn't care so much about the D file being open, because both sides have opportunities for open rooks. But if the D file ends up being dominated by your opponent and you're never able to challenge it, the fact that there's less files is going to make them more valuable. So you really have to be careful here.
And as we said just before, from the white side, if I give up my e-pawn, as long as I have control of the open file and get my piece out, that's important. But from black's perspective, bishop d7 makes perfect sense, because you connect your rooks, you give away that b7 pawn, but you're winning the a4 pawn in return. So
that's exactly the kind of thing black would want. Get active, challenge the open file before you worry about being too greedy about your pawns, and you won't have those supply and demand problems that I was talking about. So
yeah, so I expect that trade to happen on the d8 square, then he'll take on e5, and in all likelihood, this game should peter out into a draw. And the reason why I say that, and I don't want to, sort of jump the gun on that, is that just look at the material. Even number of pawns, rook and bishop aside. You can go after my A pawn, say queen back to A, or bishop D7 first is probably better, just to
make sure I get developed.
Because if you go rook D1 now, I can go queen C7 and then move my bishop again, and my back rank is safe. I'm
prepared finally to challenge that one open file, or even come to a situation where I might target white's weakness. And I agree with you. I think that this is much less dynamic than game one.
Yes.
I think a victory for Fabiano's camp. One, because he really got himself in trouble in game one with his poor preparation, or at least just being caught off guard, even if we don't want to go that far. And here he has had very little to think about, as the clocks show. No longer up an hour, but clearly been comfortable with the black pieces the whole time, and hard to imagine white creating enough problems for black to get an advantage in the endgame.
And only black can be better.
Yeah.
Honestly. In an endgame like this, where we keep talking about these trades on D8 and take on E5, the problem for white is the pawns are much more vulnerable. That pawn on E5, which seems advanced, in middle game positions, that can be very good to take up space, maybe to use an outpost, get an outpost for the knight. But the problem is, in an endgame like this, it makes it much harder to protect that pawn.
Right. It's overextended, right? Yesterday we called it a lost calf, right? It's just wandered a little too far from the ranch, and you can't do that. And that's a great point by Robert, that add some pieces back in your head. Imagine put a knight on D4, put this pawn on F2 to F4, and suddenly you're in a position where F5 is coming, and a couple of pawns together over here can launch some serious attacks.
Yeah.
And then having more space is very advantageous. But in endgames like this, you don't. The only thing we like about the pawn on E5 is that it's not in the way of the bishop. That's pretty much it. And but again, as long as Fabiano chooses activity versus being greedy, he's not going to have a problem with getting his bishop developed. Although to note, I mean, Let's say that Fabiano decides that he wants to push a position that he knows is a draw, but wants to kind of return the favor to what Magnus did to him yesterday. Maybe I play queen c7 first.
Okay.
I'm hitting e5. I know I'm not going to take it after rook d1. You can't. Calm down.
I'm calm.
I'm not
totally calm.
I'm not going to let you checkmate me. But now when I play bishop to d7, I've protected the pawn. So before I was saying don't be greedy, just get developed. Now I'm protecting my pawns, because the one thing you could argue is if I have two healthy blue pawns versus two unhealthy red pawns that have been split.
And a third unhealthy one in the center, too.
Right? I mean, maybe black is, not playing with enough of an advantage to ever claim that he would win, but enough that he can say, I'm playing for two results, and I'm going to push this and see if you need to defend. Yeah.
Absolutely. If I had the black pieces against anybody, including Magnus Carlsen, I would try my best to gain some sort of advantage. Now, what I see as a potential issue in a position like this is let's say I take off both queens. If I trade the queens, right?
Yes.
We're going to envision the future here.
They're gone.
The queens are gone.
Got it.
All the queenside pawns are gone, and I lose my e5 pawn. Okay, so let's say all those pawns are gone, and I'm down a pawn.
Yeah, this guy's gone.
In all likelihood, that
still a draw.
Still should be a draw.
Right, because this 4-on-3 structure is just not something that holds enough, given that white really doesn't have any other weaknesses besides an extra pawn. Now, again, it's still something that Fabiano could and would push, right? It's a two-result position. We use that term in chess to highlight that one side is kind of pushing for a win with no risk, right? Meaning even if we know they're not going to win, they're probably never going to lose. So that's a term you'll hear a lot probably throughout the match here in this month of November. So, okay, but Magnus taking his time here, not exactly like yesterday where we were critical of Fabiano because he was also much worse. Here I think Magnus probably just a little frustrated, knows that he's not going to have an edge at all anymore. If anything, he's fighting for a draw, but I don't expect the time here to, now that we're really seeing it peter out, to be that big of a disadvantage for Magnus.
Yeah, great preparation by Team Caruana. I'm very impressed. A bit disappointed with how Magnus has handled this game. His move bishop e2, if we go all the way back towards the opening stage, just felt a little bit too timid. I really thought the move knight d2, which has been played several dozen times, was the right choice, just trying to get that knight into the action. Knight to b3, b4 is not possibly. All these things open up for white.
This was definitely the thematic try. I'm going to try for an edge move.
Right, and stops knight e4 as well. But by playing bishop e2, he sort of walks into what happened in the game, where black was able to trade necessary pieces, shatter white's pawn structure on the queen side, and then just say, I'm totally fine in the resulting position.
Yeah, and one of the things that happened here is that for those of you who've been with us the whole time, know that after bishop e2, not only is Robert sort of critical of the fact that this was not a very ambitious move, but it also clearly didn't do anything to change Fabiano's prep. So if somehow Magnus was like, look, maybe I know knight d2 is the move, but I don't want to see what he prepared against this more well-known move, that didn't work either, because for those of you who've been with us, remember that Fabiano played knight e4 after, what, 2 seconds?
Yeah,
I mean, just instantly played knight e4. So I agree with you. I think that if Magnus wanted to push this position and maybe say, hey, rook d8 maybe surprised me, but I'm going to see what you got. Let's see what you cooked up in the kitchen. That would have been the move that challenged it. And again, those of you who were here earlier know that we highlighted that rook e8 was a move that has been played here by Nakamura many times, including against Carlsen previously. And the move bishop e7 is the most popular theoretical move. So this move, rook d8, will be looked back at and probably analyzed as the move where Fabiano first kind of really showed that he was out-preparing Magnus in this game. Not to say he's going to win because of it, but he out-prepared him. And okay, so after rook to d8 was played, bishop e2, the not-so-aggressive approach, ultimately led us to this position here where it seems like the trade on d8 has been played, and f takes e5 has now occurred on the board. So what do you think? Are we going to see the first suggested bishop d7 here? Not anymore, I guess, because you're not really threatening a4. So I think queen c7 just makes a whole bowl full of jelly sense.
I think the b7 pawn's unimportant, though, because if you play bishop d7, you can go ahead and take my pawn on b7. I think the next few moves are very natural. Take on b7, I go rook b8. I have to. And then you're likely going to move your bishop, and I'm going to go queen a5. And so I'm going to win one of your pawns.
Keep making illegal moves here. Darn Chess.com bugs.
Either e5, a4, c3,
right.
All these are weak, so I'm going to win something.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm not saying
so I agree with you. I mean, clearly this is the other approach to say I'm willing to sacrifice this previously healthy. I make my healthy pawns blue. Previously healthy pawn, giving it up because I know I'm going to win it back and get active. Although I think I'm a little bit more of an advocate for the greedy approach here, playing queen c7, because do I have? But I mean, maybe you're right, because ultimately I guess I'm probably going to have to part with that pawn if I want to get developed. But I don't know. Maybe not.
Yeah, perhaps you can just try to defend
it, and so that I can gang up. I mean, again, the reason why we're talking about this is because of a principle we highlighted very early on in today's show, that because this was going to be a positional day, we gave you a very basic intro of the QGD, Queen's Gambit Declined, and said that pawn weaknesses, pawn pressure, plans that surround whether you're ganging up properly against your opponent's pawns, this is a very Queen's Pawn-y theme. Can I say Queen's Pawn-y?
Yeah, I'll let it happen. I like it.
Okay, so that's what we're highlighting is that, yes, black is equalized here. Clearly Fabiano's done well with prep, but the question is how much can he push? And the one way to do that would be a little greedy. Say, I got some healthy pawns here, and I'm going to try to have my cake and eat it too. Get developed, and then gang up against your weaknesses and not let you have my pawn.
Yeah.
So,
I
you don't think it's enough?
Queen c7 played, it looks like.
Okay, I like it.
Yeah.
There we go. Being greedy. Way to go, Fabi.
Yeah, so, Queen c7, he's going for it. But your move rook b1 makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
And the good thing about the rook on b1, it can attacks the b7 pawn. It will maybe tie black down to that square for a little bit. And you don't really want to make a move like rook b8, but okay, it's totally fine.
It's an invite if Fabiano doesn't want to play rook b8 to just say, all right, time for a draw.
Right.
Trade e5 for b7.
Right.
And
actually, after queen e5, maybe I'll start with a move like queen d3. And actually, I will change my
that
plan
would
of
be
action.
irritating.
Because you're going to go back to c7 to stop my queen from coming to d8 and to protect the b7 square, but now go maybe rook d1.
Well, you would do that.
Yeah.
Flipping that script.
Yeah, and I'm just saying...
And again, now we're back to my commodities lesson that supply and demand, the open file, if there's only one, is often as valuable as a pawn, right? I mean, that's kind of the lesson you take when you're evaluating the initiative in these positions. It's specifically because this open file is kind of the highway that will lead to the 8th rank. It'll lead to the 7th rank. So that's how a grandmaster like Robert quickly recognizes that trick. So very, very good.
And what I always say, of course, it is important not to lose your pieces,
right?
But the quality of your pieces overrides the quantity of them.
And
so
these are not great.
If I'm down a pawn, but I'm able to get that sort of initiative going, I'm happy. And actually, another move possibly is like, let's say queen e4. And I say, please take my pawn on c3. I'll just go rook d1. And similar idea. I say, you haven't... Black, take an extra pawn on the queen side, but what are you going to do with it? Your pawns are stuck in place. They're not moving anywhere. And I control the only... there's two open files, the c file and the d file. But I control that very important d file.
Yep.
And if you go queen c7 now, check this out. Let's say I go h4 to get in space on that side of the board. If you go bishop d7, queen takes b7.
Winning the pawn back.
Oh, I'm winning a piece.
Yep.
Not just a pawn.
because after the trade...
Oh, you have bishop a4. That's so annoying.
Oh, I can play bishop a4 intermezzo. Let me
Saving
highlight
grace.
what Robert saw, everyone, which is that the bishop will come to c6 in the end with a pin emote, going wild. But there is a little intermezzo, and somehow white can't both take this rook and defend his rook at the same time. Note moves like rook d4, rook a1 both fail to rook b8. Okay, so but I hear you, Robert. And again, I think the main thing is we're highlighting something that in a game that could be about to peter out to a much quicker draw than game one, everyone. Something that is one of the few maybe instructive moments we've had here, which is this balance between value of piece development and the initiative, particularly when there's only one open file. Can't stress that enough, so that you and your own games can value that when you recognize, okay, I want to transition here into an endgame, but with less pieces on the board, the open files and open diagonals that get controlled become much more valuable, and supply and demand. So, okay. Anyway, but I agree that if this happened again, probably Fabiano doesn't take c3 and would just play bishop d7. So,
and if you play bishop d7 there, right? Like if we just go a couple moves further here, I can take on b7. You'll take back.
We got big trades.
Rook b8, and then bishop, say, e4. Let's go to bishop e4 to defend that b1 square. And why I say that's so important. If let's say bishop a4, rook a1, bishop anywhere, let's say e8, rook takes a7, very importantly, that bishop covers the back rank.
No back rank. Okay, again, these are hypothetical lines that we're showing to just sort of highlight some of the moves that we're probably about to see on the board. But let's highlight a little bit about who these players are. We've been talking so much about the fact that both these guys have very well-known chess careers and paths, and game one, we had even more, I think, to discuss on the board in a game here that we might be seeing something about to peter out. Just to remind you, in case you didn't know, Magnus Carlsen, he's pretty good at chess.
Yeah, and it's funny because everyone is making conversation about the fact that he's so close in range to Caruana. He started the year 1 point lower than he is now, so he's actually had a pretty successful year.
Funny. It's almost like the Tiger Woods effect, right?
Yes.
The fact that he won everything for so long that when he started getting second, you kind of felt like, what's wrong with Tiger?
And he actually went up to 28 in the 40s, then dropped down back to 28.35, but he's improved his rating over the year. He shared first with Anish Giri in the Tata Steel, 9 out of 13.
Right.
That is so impressive.
Yep.
He won the Gashimov Memorial with 6 out of 9, another great result. He stumbled along the way in Biel and at the European Club, but he also shared first with Fabiano and Levano Ronin at the Sinkfield Cup, so great year for him.
That's it has been a great year. We're going to see Fabiano's year in comparison, but if we're talking about historical facts, this is pretty awesome here.
Yeah,
you've got things to know about Magnus Carlsen, just so you can take this home and say, well, Mom, at least I learned something today. That he's obviously currently world number 1. You see the ratings there, but he learned to play chess at 5. We couldn't do the whole historical visuals for you, but wasn't really that into chess. Famous story that when his sister started to get better than him, that's when he found his motivation. Ellen Carlsen, his older sister. But as you can see, he crossed 2800 for the first time in September 2009 and hasn't looked back ever since. Has never been back below 2800 since then. Fabiano Caruana also having a great year. This trajectory looking much more just straight up. The best year of his life, regardless really of what happens in this match, to be perfectly honest, right?
Yeah, an amazing year, especially considering his first event of 2018 was a horrendous disaster for him in Tata Steel and Weganze. He dropped from 28.11 down into the 27.80s and now is back up to 28.32. That is a 50-point gain approximately since that Tata Steel event. He won the candidates in Berlin to qualify for this match. He won Granke ahead of Carlsen, a point ahead, and he also won Altibox Norway 5 out of 8. So look at this. Fabiano Caruana, born in Miami, grew up in Brooklyn. We talked to his coach, Bruce Pandolfini. He's the world number 2 player, currently 28.32, but his peak rating back in the day, October 2014, was 28.44, higher than Magnus' current rating.
Yep.
And we got some fun quotes as well here.
Yeah, for those who've been following the event really closely, you saw the opening day press conference, and a pretty interesting comment there where so much hype around Caruana that I don't know if that bothers Carlsen or not, but he was asked if he feels like an underdog, and I think he had a little bit more to say that. I remember him saying that, if you're world number 1 and you've defended the world championship title several times and you consider yourself an underdog, there's probably something wrong with your mental psyche. I believe that was the full quote. So Magnus does not see himself as an underdog in this match, don't you worry.
And Fabiano also doesn't see himself as an underdog because he says, Magnus has been trying to put me under pressure and he's been trying to beat me, but I'm also just as motivated. And he said that before the event, and it's a great quote, especially after that first game. I put me under pressure, trying to beat me, but I got it under control.
I mean, can somebody write a Jay-Z song about this from the bottom to the top? I mean, I don't know. But all right. Not everybody can truly come from the bottom to the top, but these two guys there, now you know their full history of how they've learned chess and how they got here. Again, we were joined by Bruce Pandolfini earlier. If you missed it, definitely back up at some point when you have time and check that out. But we did finally get a move here. White played the move Rook B1, as I predicted.
Yep.
And
so I think Rook B8 makes...
I think Rook B8 makes perfect sense, especially from the perspective that these pawns are healthy, White's pawns are not. As long as I'm not risking anything too crazy in regards to this open file, which doesn't look like I am, I have no reason not to just hold on to those guys.
And I think that Rook B8 is a good move. And you just made a point that, well, had me thinking.
Yep.
So you pointed A4, C3, and E5. How do I protect all of them? I put my queen on D4. So I'll play queen D2.
Okay.
Once again, you're not going to take my pawn on E5 because you give me the back rank and you're going to have some problems.
Not going to happen.
Not at all. That gets you in trouble. Let's say you play bishop D7, and now I play queen D4. I say, I protected everything.
I want my lady, yeah.
And I'm attacking your pawn on A7. And your rook is tied down to that pawn on B7.
But still, black's going to play B6.
And then maybe I can play A5, just to get rid of one of my weaknesses.
You would like that, but I might just go Yasser and just be greedy.
Well, what do you think about that? Do some.
You guard D1. I'm sorry. Okay, let's show the tactics since it was a great Danny blunder. Hashtag, check that off for the day. First blunder. Rook takes, queen D7. I was imagining that the pawn was not capturable, or sorry, the bishop wasn't capturable because of this, and I forgot that D1 is guarded by the queen. So there you go. Caught on camera. Caught on camera with blunder. Hashtag title my autobiography.
You've been caught on camera doing worse things.
Yeah, so. Exactly, and we're not going to talk about that. We're not going to talk about that. All right, so, okay, great point. I still think we're going to see rook to b8, and I still love your idea of queen d2.
And I think that exactly what you do with bishop b7, so we can, move order doesn't matter too much.
Something
bishop
like
b7,
this.
And if I go a5, okay, if I take on b6, we just trade pawns.
Right.
We both have weaknesses
and this might be Magnus's best road to avoiding, he doesn't want to be in a position where he's fighting against two results from Fabiano. So this is, now that we've established I can't take here, now that the blunder is over, probably this would be a road we would see for Magnus to, let's say something is played, I don't even know, maybe get the bishop to a safer square so it's not on d7.
Right.
And something like this would now black has a weakness to worry about along with white's, and this is probably the fastest road to equality for Magnus.
Right. So I think that actually that would be a very good decision by him, just to try to sneak that queen into the d4 square.
Yeah.
It's very safe. It means that his pawns are all protected, and also he's creating threats in response. The worst thing you can do in chess, and the worst kind of position you can have in chess, is when your opponent is the one creating all the threats and you're just passively defending.
Right.
And by putting your queen into the d4 square, you're making that kind of progress so that you are attacking your opponent's pawn on a7, you are keeping an eye on the d file, and that's the great thing. It highlights how great the queen is.
Right.
Because it moves like a rook and a bishop. It's covering the d file like a rook, it's covering the a7 square like a bishop, and it's doing a really great job in a position like that.
Let's just highlight that again, yeah. And it's a good, I think you made an offhand comment that we should highlight here for all of our viewers. 40,000 of you with us right now. Thank you, everybody who's here, by the way, whether you're at Twitch TV/chess, Chess.com TV. You're all amazing. Your support, the chess world loves it, and hopefully you are with us all month for this event. So the main thing I want to highlight is that Robert made an offhand comment about, in this position, recognizing that I have all these weaknesses. What's a square that I can put my queen on that deals with all of that, right? And that is just kind of an abstract comment, but a very important thought that I think that players maybe don't choose the right defensive setups by not having little tips like that in their head, right? We talked yesterday about one great tip for finding a plan is just ask, what is my worst piece on the board and how can I improve it, right? Just random questions to know. We get those questions a lot. How do I best find a plan when I don't know what to do, right? So that's a great pro tip right there, right? Just saying, this is a square I've recognized as the ideal one for the queen so that she both guards everything that is weak about my position and exerts the maximum amount of pressure in my opponent's position. So I just want to come back to that because I think it was a very kind of offhand but very important comment.
And quite objectively, right? You put a queen on d4, it challenges all the squares and the boards in the center. It's very nice.
Right.
And I want to point out that in the position that we have the live board, we have talked about this before, but some people might be new, that queen takes e5 looks like a free pawn. And bishop takes b7 is a huge blunder, because once I take back on b7, we have some back rank problems, don't we? Queen e1 mate.
Yes, we do.
So you have to make sure that your king has safety, some squares, before you start removing our pieces from the back rank. But we keep talking about this. Look at the bishop on c8. Look at the rook on a8. If I just swing my pieces to the d file,
starting with a move like this.
Yep. You can go queen back to c7. We talked about this position. Now rook to d1, and I say your pieces are absolutely stuck. And it's actually a pretty brutal pin in this case, because what you like to do when there's a pin. So let's go g6 just to make a move, and queen d8 check. We trade here. And king g7. What black would love to do, to be able to do, is play b6, bishop b7, because from b7, it protects the rook on a8. The problem here is my bishop's on f3.
So if we move this, we would show what black would like to do, get out of the pin, right?
Right, and even if that were the case, let's say I go bishop e2,
even
go b6,
even
I go back.
It still doesn't work, exactly.
And you're in an endless deadly pin because you go rook b8, and then your bishop can't move, and your rook can't move. And I can either move my king into the action or just play bishop c6 into the d7 square and win that bishop on c8. So that would be a very bad decision by Fabiano, and that's why he's thinking right now. He's not thinking, oh, like, am I going to win this pawn? And you just want to make sure
that's important, because I think we highlighted earlier, but we've had more join us, and I think there's a lot of obvious questions of, hey, why can't black just take this pawn? And we've been talking all day about this sort of principle of being so dangerous about neglecting the only open files. Again, when there's very few of them, the more dangerous they become. So, all right, well, what we haven't had is very few interaction. We've actually had a lot of people getting involved in the daily question that we asked you to join us in on. Use the hashtag ChessTV on Twitter. The hashtag Carlsen Caruana is the official hashtag of the event, but ChessTV, the best way for us to stay in touch with you and all of your amazing tweets about the daily question. More of a fun one today. Yesterday was who's going to win. Pretty obvious way to start off the match, but today, these guys both got car in their name, so what kind of car are they really? What would they drive based on their chess style, maybe based on their personalities? And let's take a look at some of these. This one may just take the cake right away, because this is about as good as it gets. Hashtag Carlsen Caruana predictions. Caruana has all the plans prepared safely like the building plan of a Tesla, but Carlsen will be creative to destroy every advantage, resulting in exciting games. That will all be drawn. I don't even know who's driving in that picture. It looks like Fabiano's driving and Carlsen's the passenger.
No, Fabiano's driving that way, and the future car
is driving the other way. I don't even understand if that's a real car, but great work there.
That's amazing.
Great work. The 11-year-old says Fabi is a Porsche 911 Carrera GTS.
0 to 60 in 3.6.
Okay, Suzanne, your 11-year-old knows a lot about cars. He's done his preparation and is moving fast. Magnus is a Lexus LX, reliable brand, can go anywhere. He's a reliable positional player, and he works well in most positions. Get that kid a Diamond membership if he doesn't have it. I don't even care if we choose a win. Seriously, let's get that kid a Diamond membership. I'm turning to my producer right now. Caruana in a Tesla, I'm not sorry. Oh my God.
That's so good.
That wins. That guy also, today on the Oprah Winfrey of Diamond memberships, everybody's getting one.
That is
oh my
unbelievable.
Gosh, that was awesome. That was awesome. All right, so much fun. Back to the game that, for those of you who want us to focus solely on the chess, we got to have a little bit of fun here, especially given that there really hasn't been much action. We did finally just see rook to b8, the move we predicted. But, again, looks like the road we're going to travel here, speaking of car references, is going to be the one you talked about. The queen now comes to d3. I'm guessing Carlsen is preparing queen d4, just as you said.
Right.
And we might get that exact line Robert highlighted. Time to get developed if you're Fabiano. Queen goes to d4, where she both defends and attacks, and after b6, a5. I think this is the simplification road we're about to see.
Yeah, because if black doesn't play b6, and I'm trying to think of another move, maybe a5, or you don't really want to play like that, because if you play a5 as black, you leave behind weak squares, and that's what always happens.
And the b7 pawn is now backward.
Exactly, the b7 pawn's backward. I can plug a rook on b6. Although if I go rook b6,
you would plug a rook.
Bishop takes a4 might be an option now, because my queen is overloaded.
Don't plug your rooks at home, kids.
Yeah, just maybe there's some queen d6 options. You don't want these kind of backward pawns and loose squares that white can take advantage of. So after queen d3, I just think we'll see the bishop d7, pawn b6, and what Caruana will do is say, I had a great preparation today. I had a very solid game.
Yep.
I did well in the clock.
Stress.
No stress. Did well in the clock because I will save my energy for the white pieces tomorrow. Because he needs to do much better, and he will do much better tomorrow than he did yesterday. So not tomorrow. The game is on Monday. It's a rest day tomorrow.
Right.
So he will do much better the second go at the white pieces, and he'll say, I've evened up. The score remains even. 5-5. 5-5. I can't. I don't know what I'm saying anymore. This is 2 games.
Keep talking, buddy. I love it.
But it's really 1-1. we both will have 5 whites and 5 blacks
from here
remaining.
on out, right?
So we have the even colors, we have even score. That's a great place to be.
And if you evaluate both games, right? If you're evaluating just the first game, then we know that we were in kind of a one that Magnus feels like he let get away and would leave Fabiano feeling uneasy. But now you get this one, you get a very easy draw with solid preparation as black. Kind of feels like you sort of reset things a little bit.
I just had a flashback to my Rascal Flatts quote yesterday, and you keep saying easy, and just in my head, I have just the song Easy going on now.
Easy. You were just so? Can we talk about Rascal Flatts here?
I didn't know. I like Rascal Flatts.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there a problem with that? Oh,
there's nothing wrong with it. I just, I didn't know that you were, like I said, I mean, are they a boy band? Are they a pop band? Are they a country band?
Well, that song they sing with Natasha Bedingford, so it's kind of.
So you do go your own way, I guess. Which they didn't cover that. They covered "Life Is a Highway."
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You can go your own way. That's not Rascal Flatts.
I know. I thought they covered that.
I wish they did.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Yeah.
Somebody call Rascal Flatts. All right. Well, we're not seeing the position on the analysis board that I have there yet. We still just have the move rook to b8 and queen to d3 being played. But what else can we anticipate here that might add some spice, add some life to the position? Although we're already kind of foreshadowing the storyline here today that seems to be a very good recovery game. Not panicked with the black pieces despite not starting off well with white. Fabiano Caruana looks like he's just using home cooking for a draw here. Had to do very little thinking on his own. So I wouldn't be surprised if this type of endgame just occurred in their prep. It's like, look, if you get this, this is pretty simple. Right? I mean, this is we say that a lot of preparation is not always just 0 to 60 of the moves you planned. It's a combination of a lot of memorization, but also just recognizing if you reach this type of structure, X, Y, and Z is good for you. If you reach this type of position, A, B, C is a good plan, right? And that's a really important point because you can't anticipate everything just from a practical perspective, but you want to make sure you're reaching positions you're comfortable with what the next steps will be. And I wouldn't be surprised if they had this exact sort of thing on the board.
Bishop D7.
Yeah, I think that black is just on his way here to an easy draw. And yeah, Bishop D7.
Yeah, and we've been talking about this, right? Just queen d4, protect everything, attack a7, and after b6, a5, it looks. Let's actually talk about one line here. After queen d4, b6, a5. Let's say black is trying to say, I want to keep your a pawn as a weakness, so I will go b5 myself.
Oh, okay.
And say, look at that. Now I'm attacking your pawn on a5, but I'm not really because my bishop on d7 is under attack.
Right.
And then I start thinking from white's perspective, maybe I can even keep pushing that pawn to a6.
Do it. A6, open up the B7 square, new landing spot.
Yeah, and that's worrying me a little bit because now white's gaining some very important space. And not to mention, instead of playing A5, you can also just play rook to D1. So, after A5, B5, pardon.
Oh, okay. A5, B5, rook to D1.
So, if you play bishop E8, maybe queen D6, and I'm starting to gain some momentum for white. I'm just gaining some space in the position. Now that pawn A7, if I can get that pawn, then I'll have... My a5 pawn is pretty far advanced.
Well, I like your idea of queen d6 enough that I think we should back up because I think we did black's position a disservice by going with b5. I don't know that black should play b5.
Right, I don't.
But what if white goes for that idea anyway with a move like rook to d1 and queen to d6? Is this possible? I guess the issue in all these lines in the end is now I trade in a4 falls. Okay, but this would be a nice idea and a way for Carlsen to transition to either great control of the open file or a passed d pawn, and the reason is this c3 pawn is not capturable. That's kind of the whole tactic that you should be aware of. But okay, the reason why we really want to play a5 before committing to anything like that is this weakness is something we have to deal with before we can get jiggy with anything over there on the d file. And again, in fact, that's why it looks like we actually just saw a5 on the board, very similar to the whole point of queen d4. But playing a5 now works just fine because the queen cannot leave the d7 bishop behind. So, a5 looks good, and I think that this will be a good moment, sort of a gut check moment, right? Because I think that one thing Fabiano can do if he really thinks he has an opportunity to play for a win would be, I don't know, a move like bishop e8 to just directly threaten this, or even a move like a6 to try to open up the b5 square. I'm anticipating that we see moves that are more geared towards simplification. Bishop c6.
Bishop c6, yes.
b6 even possible, just because that's a line we've been looking at. So I'm guessing we don't see that, but I'm curious as to what Fabiano, he'll tip his hand here as far as how he really feels about this position.
So bishop c6, I mean, that looks very interesting. So
yeah.
if I go I guess I want to go queen d6.
Right?
And
No, I can't take here because of the rook.
Mm-hmm. And if you take on d6, which looks right, and take on f3, you shatter my kingside pawn structure, but at the same time, now white's pieces are very far advanced on the queen side. So let king f8, you want the king on d7, right? We'd love to rush that there. But if I go c4, king e8, c5, king d7, I have a6 now.
Suddenly white is just way ahead of things.
And, it's at least putting black under some pressure. Okay, you can go b6.
Yeah.
And if I take, you take back with your pawn. You definitely don't take back
don't take
with
with the rook. That would allow this.
So you take back with the pawn on b6. I go a7. You go, yep, and I take. And this should be... the reason why I say this should be a draw is if I go king g2. You can't actually get to my d6 pawn without moving your rook from the 7th rank, but if you go rook a5 to come try to corral that pawn, exactly, rook b7 check, and if you take my d6 pawn, you lose f7.
My only disagreement is I may have a move like this, and I may get to that pawn.
Oh, you might, actually.
By keeping my rook on the 7th rank. So, I think this is an instructive line just to show some possible trades, but probably not really something white wants to be all-out aggressive with if you push the pawns too far. Okay, interesting. Well, again, I think this will be a telling moment in regards to how Caruana feels about the position, mainly because, again, we've been highlighting for a while that white has more weaknesses, just optically, than black does, right? Positional weaknesses, three really to only one for black, really the B pawn being kind of the only real target in black structure. But because white's pieces are more active and on these more critical diagonals, what that means is this activity just too much for black to justify a slow approach where he thinks he can grind it out and gang up on these? And that's a very risky thing, because if you decide you feel nervous about white's activity, then you're looking to simplify. If you decide you think you have enough here, then Caruana is going to play a move like bishop e8, which, again, removes the bishop from being under fire, immediately threatens to take here. I think Carlsen can play a6, which is why that second move I suggested was if you're really feeling frisky, you would risk a move like a6, saying, I'm going to keep your pawn stuck on its tracks. I might even put my bishop on b5, where you can't play c4. And I'm saying, like, look, I'm legit going to try to push this position as black.
But the problem is always queen d6, right? You're right in theme, but queen d6 forces the queens off the board.
Right, and I thought I could play this in the end.
And then I'll go c4.
c4.
Now I'll go
and
c4
so you're
because
just forcing me to
b7.
trade. I wanted to play bishop b5 to block the b5 from the rook, and then hope that I could, again, kind of corral these calves back to the ranch. But okay, I hear you. So again, those are the philosophical decisions that could be made here. Likely, I think we're just thinking that neither side is going to have enough to play for anything more than a peaceful result. But I think we have enough of a break in the action here. We're going to take a quick break, actually, and be right back in just a moment. The action is either going to heat up with somebody saying that they think they have enough to play for a win, that person being Fabiano Caruana, or some simplification about to happen, maybe getting a much shorter game than we had in Game 1. But don't go anywhere. We will be back in just a few moments to get to all the rest of the action here.
Oh wait, we're back. Oh,
there you go. Once again, caught a wild Danny in his natural habitat. All right, we are here covering Game 2, Round 2 of the 2018 World Chess Championship. Thank you to all of you that are with us, regardless of where you may be tuning in from. We are going to be looking at a critical position here on the board, as we said. What will be the approach for Fabiano from here on out? He's equalized with ease. Really done his job. Him and his team have done his job to recover from a very bad opening as white in Game 1. But now he's picking his choice there. What to do? I'm anticipating a move like Bishop C6, something that simplifies the position before Magnus's pressure on the B file gets to be too much, and I think you're on the same page with me.
Yeah, I think that right now Fabiano is just trying to consider, you've made this great point. There's a moment here we consider, do I play for that win? In which case, do I have to risk anything? And if I can't play a win, do I conserve that energy and just, well, the rest day's tomorrow. So actually, they're going to have that energy no matter what for Monday. But yeah, we just look at the position. And the critical teaching moments, I would say, are we look at pawns. And this position is about the pawns. We see that the pawn A5 is under threat. The pawn on E5 is under threat. But of course, the queen on D3 is tying that queen on C7 to that bishop on D7, which means that you can't gobble up the pawns just yet. You can't move the rook from B8 because the pawn on B7 is under attack. The bishop on D7 doesn't really have anywhere useful to go. If you go to A4, you're on an empty square where the bishop actually can be attacked quite easily, and you always have to consider, if you're playing with the black piece in a position like this, what is the consequence of the queen trade queen D6?
Yeah.
Because now with that pawn on B7...
Well, black even has to be careful in some of these transitions, and not to say that black couldn't hold a draw, but the tables do turn enough where suddenly you're a little bit worried about white's pressure in the endgame.
Right. And so, that bishop C6 move that you recommended, I think it's a good move. You just offer an exchange of bishops.
And I think it's the appropriate move if Fabiano feels like, all right, I did my job, time to keep it simple. Right?
Right. And after bishop C6, we were talking about the move queen D6, but maybe we can even just take it. We can perhaps offer the trade of bishops.
We'll dive into the analysis here and kind of get into that, since we're coming around more and more to agreement here that bishop to C6 seems like black's most straightforward approach. So let's look at it. Okay, bishop to C6. So are you thinking we like queen D6 and we're going to risk that kind of kingside gets punctured up line, or does white just want to take and keep it simple as well?
Yeah, the queen D6 move, it's a risky move by white because after trading everything, it's clear that white is not going to be
right. And for those of you who maybe just joined, Robert and I actually analyzed this line, and it looks dangerous. And certainly, if there was a tactical blow now to put the game away, then it's justified, right? The problem is, it looks like black is getting here in time.
Maybe.
And the thing is, if you don't have that put-away move, now all of a sudden these pawns are starting to look a little overextended. You might lose all of them and then have weaknesses on the king side to go with it. A line that Robert gave was A6, taking advantage of the pin emote. Love those pins on rooks. But B6 is just fine for something where, again, white is going to be holding. So the main thing here is that white now has to be worried about the fact that he's just gone too far. D6 is too far. E5 and king E6. So again, we looked at that line. I feel like I have confirmation now that we've seen it a couple times that I don't really feel like that's something I can advocate for. I feel like white needs to be a little more cautious here.
Right.
Maybe take on C6.
Yeah, if you take on C6, if you take with the pawn, we start trading everything.
You could take either, actually.
Well, say if you take with the pawn, we just trade on B8.
Yeah.
And it looks like we're just trading all the necessary material, and so I can protect my pawn on 5. I should probably do that.
Probably should do that. I mean, how do we want to do that?
Let's say I go F4.
Yeah, I was going to say I'm a little bit cautious about that, but I guess with only the queens on the board, not so worried about the diagonals there. But okay, this might even be like a handshake extension. If not for the 30 move rule, you can see that probably they would need to get to move 30, given the official rules and format of the match, or that there are no draws allowed before move 30. But okay, regardless of the formalities, we're petering out to something simple.
Yeah, so that would be what if black's trying to play for win. Of course, you don't want to start trading all these pieces. But after bishop c6, when we take on c6, if you take with the queen, that's more in the spirit of trying to play for a win, because you're saying up to queen c6, I'm going to keep the rooks on the board. Maybe my rook will go to c8 to hit the pawn on c3.
That's why I wanted it, yeah.
But queen d4 still seems to be a good move because you're attacking a7. Everything is protected for white for now.
Yeah. And a move like a6 invites further pressure.
Right.
Moves like rook to b6. So yeah, I don't think either one of us is disagreeing kind of many roads that are leading to Rome, and Rome being a draw, right? Is what it feels like right now, and it would be interesting to see if one of these players surprises us. I said I felt like this was a critical moment because I'm expecting bishop c6, and if anything but a simplification offering happens, then we have a game. Right? Something might happen here because it might be a little risky for Fabiano if he doesn't simplify it out based on things Robert has pointed out. Threats of queen d6, the pressure along the b file here, right? So okay. I think we're expecting it. So.
Yeah, I'm trying to think what else. I mean, Fabiano is taking a deep think here, but I really just think it's gathering his breath and just thinking, I survived. You know, after that terrible first game, I played a very safe, very solid, very good. Okay, bishop c6, as we see, just
I hate
played.
when we predict things. Honestly, because I'm not trying to pretend like I can ever make good chess moves again in my life, so I don't really. I mean, sometimes it's like, oh, okay, good. I'm seeing the direction of the games well today. But overall, I'm like, if we're predicting things together, you and I commentating, we make a strong player, because I think when you put two titled players in a room, we kind of help keep we keep each other's blunders in checks, right? Yeah. We've talked about that, right? Like almost the commentary is better. The combined commentary is better than our individual strengths. Right. And so I think as we're right about some of these predictions, it kind of means that the most simple path is being followed, and it means we're headed for a draw. No blunders. I want train wrecks.
Well, yeah, I definitely agree with that. And I'm trying to figure out if Caruana is being a bit sneaky because of something you said. You're influencing me here. I don't know if that's a good thing, but you are influencing me. So
got that on camera, right?
If we trade on c6, and I take with the pawn. So didn't you say if we trade rooks on b8? And what you said about having the king issues for white, right? The king on g1. So f4, maybe you should play queen b2. And you're throwing queen c1 check, which hits the f4 pawn. You're hitting c3 or immediately. Queen a1 check is an option. And just like the white queen on d4 seemed to be doing everything, that black queen on b2 is pretty much controlling the entire board right now, or at least the important parts of the board.
Yeah, no, it's interesting, and I think we shouldn't underestimate that. All things being equal, queen and pawn endings do have more winning chances, I think, than people realize. More than, like, let's say, just pure rook and pawn endings, right? Where the dynamics of the rooks being the horizontally stuck pieces tend to challenge each other well. There's the old and famous sayings, all rook endings are drawn. It's not really so for queen endings. You have to be careful to allow your opponent to win even a single pawn in a queen ending, because they can, if you're not able to get counterplay chances like perpetual checks against the enemy king, you can be defending for a long time. If you have a single pass pawn here for black, this is probably a winning ending. So, a good point.
Yeah. And just
I don't know who made that good point, me or you, but you did.
You led me to it.
I led you
there.
You
inspired me.
Yeah, no, I'm kidding. No, it's a great point, and I think that could be a little bit of a tricky way to say, once again, Fabiano is playing for two results. I kind of called out this move as being what I think is the clearest road to a peaceful result, also a successful result, given that Fabiano was black. But who knows? Maybe we get a line like that. So.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out if there's anything else that... actually, now I'm thinking about it. Maybe there's something else I can do. So if we go through this line again, where we take on c6.
Okay.
Pawn takes c6.
Okay.
So trade rooks.
Why not?
And let's say I make the move g3 g3.
Right, so here you're saying, I think I can give up this pawn.
Yep. So
because I'm going to get this kind of play.
That's what I wanted, but I'm not sure it's enough, because you're going to...
c3's hanging.
A lot of my... Yeah, a5 and c3 are hanging. You're going to go up a pawn. That can't do that.
Okay, yeah.
Not good enough.
I was testing you. You passed.
No, I failed to begin with. So I don't like this endgame for white.
Suddenly, we're looking at bishop c6 as not just the best way to liquefy the pressure that we've been highlighting Magnus has as kind of compensation for these weak pawns, everyone, but bishop c6 really being kind of the most obvious and logical way to continue the game. I'll tell you what's not obvious or logical, and that's an emote I'm about to share under your account.
You're going to share an emote on my account?
Yeah. As you on Twitter.
Uh-oh. Twitter?
I'm looking for it. No, on Twitch.
I see it.
It is.
I see what you're doing. Don't do it. Don't do it. Oh, you're doing it. It's too late.
Doing it. Hess-Bay's back, everyone.
Oh.
Get your Hess-Bay emote. That's Robert Hess and Chess Bay, who love each other very much. You guys have a great relationship, right?
Chess Bay is phenomenal.
Okay.
How could anybody not like Chess Bay?
Exactly, and we had to bring it back. The Hess Bay emote has gone wild.
There it goes.
You look good with a bow in your hair. I don't know if I've told you that lately.
Well, you know, you haven't.
Yeah.
But look at the move on the board, by the way.
Yeah. We got to move.
Queen D6.
Queen D6.
So.
What? That's the line you were looking for.
But I just.
What does he see that we missed?
Everything.
I mean, Magnus sees everything we missed. But okay, let's go for the line. Queen D6 takes. This is what we analyzed this. Stay with us. We were just here.
And let's point out that you have to take on F3. Because if you don't, I'm going to take on C6 and your pawn is pinned.
Right. Too much. And a move like rook to D8, I assume we're gonna take here. I'd like to get C4, C5, but I can't. But okay, even this just looks like not something we want to allow. Wait. No, actually, okay, wait. Maybe that's an interesting idea. Because how do you deal with the D pawn?
Let's see. One idea is to play A6. I don't know if it actually.
Ooh.
It doesn't. Well, actually.
Undermining town population.
So if you take,
but
I
I'm gonna
take back,
and then take.
and then I'm going to rook D1, and I'm going to start pushing my
Two
C-pawn.
passers.
Yeah.
So dangerous. But okay, I play here.
King, C4.
Get here.
You're barely.
I get here.
Rook
get there
A1.
just in time. Oh, I thought you played rook B1.
No, it's going to rook A1.
Okay, but best case scenario, you have a draw.
Draw.
Best case scenario, because black is there in time.
Yeah.
But this was the line we anticipated. That's why I'm surprised here, because I felt like we established that this was an idea, but black is going to get in front of these pawns in time, and we're about to find out, because Fabiano quickly taking here.
So bishop takes F3 is what, you know.
That was the first time we looked at, but now I'm thinking rook D8 might be just as straightforward.
But I like bishop F3 more, because at the very least you're hurting the pawn structure on that side of the board.
I feel like Magnus maybe just gave Fabiano more winning chances than he bargained for.
I don't know. I mean, here you take on F3. I'm trying to think of the defense, because once I get my pawn to C5, I'm feeling pretty happy about that, honestly. So bishop F3 takes king F8.
But I'm liking it.
C4, king E8, C5. Okay, king D7. So let's stop here for a second.
Okay.
White has a protected pass pawn, D6. The rook is tied to the pawn on B7 for now.
Yes, sir.
For now. And we were talking about the move A6. We wanted that to work, but it.
But maybe you're saying maybe we jumped the gun on that. Maybe we don't need to go for that.
And also another funny thing is after A6, if you go B6 and I take with my rook on B6, it doesn't actually work out, but it comes very close.
One thing about B6 there is I'm not threatening anything right now.
But you're going to go king C6 next, which is highly annoying.
Okay, so I was just making sure. Okay, so takes.
And I was going to take with a rook, just to show a funny tactic.
Oh, yeah. Okay, yeah.
No. With my white rook.
Oh, I was going to say, I thought you were showing the... Okay, well, now
Well,
let's
show
both.
this too.
If you take this way, you lose because two pass pawns are not possible for the king to stop there. And you're saying you're going to go for
No. Before C takes B6.
What are you saying?
You're not letting me do it. Rook takes B6. So
right here?
Yes, right here.
Okay, cool. Got it.
And after pawn takes B6,
A7. Now I see.
The problem is, after rook A8, take king C6 is in time to stop my pawn. Because if your king was farther away, your rook can't stop two very far advanced past pawns.
But the point of everyone is D7, you just ignore this one and take here, and the rook is doing everything it needs to guard everything.
From behind the pawns, rook cannot stop two pawns in the 7th rank.
Right.
But on the 8th rank, it just defends everything there.
Yep. No, it's a great point. And that's just also a very quick tip to take away. Behind the pawn, right? If you have a position like this and this rook is anywhere but on the 8th rank, you can't deal with both pawns. Even if it's literally on a square like this where it's attacking one of them, usually you can't take both at once. But here the rook guards everything, and black would be okay. So fun tactic, but doesn't work.
So that means A6 is probably not the right move. I mean, I got to keep my pawn on A5.
But again, if you here comes king C6 again.
Right. So if I go rook C1.
But now you're just hoping I don't have time to gather these pawns.
So king G2. I'm trying to figure out how black makes the same progress.
It just doesn't feel like...
Because king B5 would actually be a really big blunder.
King B5 is
C6.
a blunder. C6. And suddenly we have a skewer.
Yep. Whenever your king is on the same line as any of your other pieces, you always have to look
aware, right? Be afraid.
For
Like
opening
never
up the
turn your back on the ocean. Never turn your back on your king being on the same line as your other pieces. No, seriously, those are the kind of tactics you should just always have a little alarm clock. Not to say you can't play those moves, but don't take them for granted. Okay, so that's a great point. King B5 can't be played, but okay, I'm going to play this move first anyway. Move. Right? Now I'm going to go to D7 and King B5.
And then you're going to go after my pawns.
I'm going to work it with no diggity.
But you're not going to back it up.
Nope. Never back it up, but always work it with no diggity. Okay, no, but this is a problem for Magnus because we have weaknesses, and we have pawns that tried to prove themselves but ran into a blockading king.
Right.
So why is this something that Magnus is going for? Everyone, I mean, he's committed to this transition that. Okay, it may, and let's explain something as far as the bigger picture as to why we feel that black has winning chances if indeed a line like that occurs, right? So let's say we get a line like this that we've been analyzing, and the reason why we're saying that black has winning chances in this kind of game when we were just saying earlier all rook endings are drawn, right? The point is, if somehow black manages these 3 pawns to disappear for these 2, there may be some weird positions where I get the king up here and you have trouble guarding all these pawns, right? Like lines we were just looking at, where if you commit to guarding the pawn and I get the rook to d7, you may lose more than that, right? I mean, You have to be very careful. But let's even say, everyone, in an imaginary world, Magnus loses these 3 for these 2. This is not a normal rook and pawn ending where you have 4 versus a healthy 3 pawns. 3 pawns with no weaknesses. This is a 4-on-3 with doubled F pawns and an isolated H pawn. Now, there are still very, very good drawing chances for white, but that is a position black will legitimately be trying to win for a very long time.
Right.
There's a famous example of a game where Jerome Pickett actually beat Kasparov in an endgame with 4 pawns versus 3. Those were healthy pawns. So if Kasparov can lose an ending trying to defend with 3 pawns versus 4 where they're healthy,
anyone can.
Anyone can. And so is that a fair point here to really just highlight that the bigger picture of this position, the reason why we reacted the way we did, or at least I did, to queen d6 was precisely because I was like, wait a second. If this backfires, Magnus has losing chances here.
Yeah.
You agree?
I definitely agree. And I'm trying to figure out the correct defense because bishop takes f3 feels like the most challenging.
Yeah, this feels like the line, like I'm saying. Like, if you feel like you have winning chances, okay, let's go. Okay, I have an idea for Magnus. So let's go with this and king here. What if Magnus plays a6 first?
Okay, so b6.
b6. Now you've immediately stopped c5. And I have no ideas follow-up. I have no way to follow that up. It's a horrible idea. And now you're threatening this. Okay, just kidding. Yeah, so not a good idea for Magnus.
So, okay, bishop takes f3. Let's try to find a new one.
Okay.
G takes f3.
Okay, I'm going king of
So
a.
c4 again. We'll just put.
By the way, we called this line like a half hour ago. We are all over it today. I don't know if you're watching anywhere else, but you're in the right place. This is like Robert Hess is just.
All right, so king e8, c5, king d7. Can I somehow go rook a1? Like, I'm trying to make.
You're trying to make something out of nothing. You're trying to make, Magnus gave you lemons.
Yeah, and I'm trying.
You're trying to make lemonade for him.
Yeah,
but you may not have lemonade.
So if I go rook a1, let's just try that.
I think it's lemonade.
a6. So if you go king c5, I'll go d7, and now my threat is rook c1 check to c8. That's a huge threat.
Huge threat. So I can't just take this pawn, check a Ruski, rook to c8.
Oh, you rook b1 check.
Rook b1 check. Oh, it doesn't work. That means black would just be winning.
If that were to happen, yeah.
How nuts would that be? And what if Magnus calculated a line like that and blundered?
But okay,
it's highly unlikely.
After takes, I can just take back with the rook, and then we're getting that end game we keep talking about of 4 pawns versus 3 pawns. I'm going to win your a7 pawn. You're going to win my d7 pawn.
Right, but that's what Fabiano will take this.
Of course.
Black's playing for
a win.
Okay. I'm still surprised by queen d6. So, yeah, so not a6 then, I'm saying.
Right.
But that means how are you dealing with this? And we just said, if you settle on defense, I have a plan. I will bring my rook here first. Maybe even come to the 7th rank. Maybe not. Maybe I go to b5 first. I don't know, because just to prove lines, there's lines like this where you give a check, and I just go here first. And I'm still going to get rook d7.
Right.
The one thing I guess I have to be like kind of funnily careful about is lines where I get a little bit too frisky here and you somehow can take and push. But okay, here probably doesn't work because of check. But the point is, if this king wasn't being in check, maybe these pawns are too strong.
That's the theme we were talking about before.
Right, so that's
pawns.
One thing you got to be careful about if you're Fabiano. But other than blundering, these queenside pawns are going to meet their maker with this black king. And we have a game, ladies and gentlemen. Don't go anywhere. I think we have a game where Fabiano's trying to win his black.
He definitely is. I just feel like there has to be something, because Magnus wouldn't play this queen d6 move unless he really saw out.
Yeah, and Fabiano's clearly gone into the think here.
Which means that he's trying to figure out...
So what are we missing? This is where some people are at home with Stockfish. Like, oh, tell Danny and Robert what they're missing. No. Again, the Twitch chatter who cried Stockfish. It's a sad ending for that kid. Anyway, well,
how do we do this?
I don't know. I think Magnus has some problems.
All right, let's try something else. So bishop f3.
Okay.
This is we'll just stay at this point.
We got to stay here.
So rook b4.
Rook to b4?
Yes.
Now you're trying to go principal of two weaknesses on me, right?
Yep.
Or are you going to the c file?
I haven't decided yet.
Look at you, keeping your options open. You're playing the field.
Mm-hmm.
Way to do it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Playing the chessboard.
Playing the chessboard.
So rook c4.
All right.
And I think we've managed to get just in time.
Okay, now you've got that draw you needed, because here's what's happening. King d7. Robert has devious plans of sacrificing his weakness for a healthy pawn.
Although there's still weak pawns on the queen side,
Right.
that maybe that king can just go start taking.
Right. This would be a funny race, because you could get some position like this.
Yeah, and you're gonna maybe you wanted to go c5 to b5, but still same idea. You're just going after the queenside pawns, and can be dangerous. Although a6 at the right moment will be a nice move for white, like here.
So maybe I should have done the line you said, go to c5.
But a6 still.
Then you play a6
That's a
first.
really nice inclusion. The reason why is because if you take on g7, I'm going to start losing this
right,
pawn.
Now you're losing healthy pawns, and this guy's going to run.
Yep. And so they have officially traded bishops, by the way. So that is
so Fabiano
that's the
has
correct
taken,
starting point.
Taken, and he instantly played King of Fate.
Yep.
Hashtag confidence. Sorry, I don't know where that came from.
Yeah, confidence. He's a confident guy.
He's playing confident.
He's motivated.
Right,
we saw his quote.
Motivated. We saw the quote. Fabi's motivated, and he says Magnus. That literally sounded like a rap song to me. Like they keep trying to put me down, but they can't. Right? That's how it felt. Like all of a sudden the game was in my head, and weirdly Jay-Z was there, even though the game and Jay-Z never did a crossover.
Yeah.
So
how do you get there?
How did I get there? Like Jay-Z, what are you doing in here? Get out of my head.
I'm actually not positive.
Magnus Carlsen, Diamond member in the Chess TV chat, probably feeling the pain right now as his namesake is going to be fighting for a draw here. Shout out to everybody over there. R Beast, we've been following you. As Fabi is licking his chops right now. Diamond member R Beast. And yeah. Hey, Needless Firestorm. You've been here all day. You for being here.
Definitely concerned about Magnus' position. It's such an interesting role reversal from yesterday.
It's super, just like you and I discussed last night, and we can talk a little bit about this as we wait to see how Magnus is going to justify this Queen D6 idea. But we talked a little bit about what a blow it would have been if Magnus won that game, and he should have won that game. And that's why, despite the fact that it could still be kind of a win of how well it went as black, he didn't win. Right. He had wins on the board.
Right.
And now we were saying, gosh, if the world champion had won with black, like, is the match over? Like, literally, are you calling it at that point? Because now he has more whites and a full point with what a lot of people feel is draw odds, given that he's so much better at rapid and blitz than Fabi. So it was like, you and I were sitting there like, wow, like, what if Magnus had won this game? We would have been trying to keep this thing entertaining, in some ways. And now, a total role reversal here.
Right.
Fabiano playing spectacularly as black. Preparation that leads to a position that it seems only black can win.
Doing all the right stuff.
All the right stuff. All the right moves.
I mean, I really thought that today, after yesterday's game, Magnus had that dominant game with the black pieces and couldn't put it away. And we're going to come back to that every round. Woulda, coulda, shoulda. Mm-hmm. That was a game that he had to win.
Right.
And it's a 12-game match. Not many games are being played. So every point matters. Every half point matters.
Yep.
And I think that he will hold this game ultimately right now. But, yeah, this is... I guess I owe Kostya Kavutsky, international master and common... he does a lot for Chess.com. He writes articles and does all sorts of things.
I don't know that you owe an apology, but it was interesting if you follow both Robert Hess on Twitter and Hello Kostya, I believe is his name, but had an exchange where Robert said, this is still a win for Magnus given how well that went as black, and I think he makes a good point, but Kostya was like, wait a second, no, like, things went about as bad as possible for Fabiano, but then he defended well. Like, how is that not great match experience? I think that was Kostya's point. He's like, hey, that's match experience under your belt that Fabiano so desperately needs.
And he made a point, at the cost of just one white. And actually, I want to elaborate on that some more because I said to Kostya, who's a friend of mine, I mean, he's a great chess player. I said you underestimate the value of having the white pieces at this elite level.
Right.
And what I mean by this, we know all the best players, and we've talked to them at length about it. If you say, "Oh, I'm playing black against Maxime Vacher-Lagrave.
Right.
It's like, let me go hide in the corner. Yeah, it's
Right. Not everybody can just draw Vichy and Non with the black pieces in the French with ease.
All right. You don't gotta.
You're doing good. You make a great point. Seriously, white is. It's like having the most appropriate sports analogy to make is like having serve in tennis.
Exactly.
And there's a reason why you hear those commentators. The match begins when somebody breaks the serve, right? Because serve is so hard to break at the elite levels, and it really is something that I think you had a good counterpoint.
And what we were talking about at Isle of Man, we just the Chess.com Isle of Man event, where all these top players were playing in just casual conversations.
Right.
These players would, even against grandmasters who weren't in the super elite level, they would say, on black tomorrow, this is going to be a struggle because you have to find a way to equalize.
Yep.
And it's very difficult against these top players because they play so many different things, and white generally gets an advantage over, and like you said, with this tennis serve. I think having a tennis serve is even more of an advantage than having the white piece in chess.
But it's the most appropriate comparison. I believe we had a question there from Ruben something that I wanted to just answer. Ruben Sandwich. We are covering the Women's World Chess Championship with daily news reports at chess.com/news, but also I don't know if we're covering every round right now because everything is so dominated by it, but we are providing coverage. We actually have our official photographer and one of our journalists on site, Maria Emrilanova, Miss Lova, as she was known in New York in 2016.
Yep.
And there are recap shows happening every few days with Grandmaster Alex Yermolinsky. So not showing any of that, but just wanted you.
News reports by Ivanka Hauska.
Yeah, that's right. So we are covering that. So if you're interested in the Women's World Chess Championship going on from Conti-Monsisk, we encourage everybody to follow that. And it's a very exciting event. Honestly, so much exciting chess being played there, but that's not our job to commentate on that right now. But wanted to say that. Sorry.
Yep. But what we are commenting is, C4. And also, does Magnus have 17 minutes for 14 moves?
Legit time pressure, dog.
Yeah.
I don't know why I just called you dog, but hey, legit.
I don't want to do that either, but
homie.
C4. Right, it has to be.
Wait, you played C4?
No, but I'm saying...
it's going to have to happen. Yeah, I agree.
Because the other lines we looked at did not look very promising, so C4...
Yeah, well, okay, let's go back to your rook lift idea, right?
Just your simple response.
Wait. Combine your rook lift idea with A6.
Oh. What if you go B5 instead of B6?
Oh.
Or then maybe C4.
But then C4. Okay. Wait a second.
Wait,
Holy shenanigans. What?
So A6, like your move.
A6.
Yeah. B5.
Uh-huh.
C4, if I go King D7.
Wait a second. Watch out.
I'm watching. Oh, you sneaky.
I have a sneaky doggy. Look at this. Takes, shake and bake. It's not how many pawns you have left in the endgame, everybody. It's who gets a lady first.
Yep.
And that is a combination you have to watch out for whenever your opponent has a pawn majority, because they can sack their way to a queen. Wait a second. This has got to be the idea. Now we've found it.
Okay, so rook B4.
Rook B4 or A6 first.
I like rook B4 first.
Okay. So rook B4.
You know why A6 is probably not... So if you go A6, I go B6. And after rook B4, now I can go rook C8.
Yeah, now you're free.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that changes things because you don't want to commit this.
Right.
No, I think you're 100% right. So rook B4 comes first. Okay. And if I don't stop you from playing A6, which now all of a sudden is on my brain because you hadn't rushed the pawn. So that's what we have to come back to consider. But before we do, let's go for this line one more time. And the point is, Robert mentioned earlier an idea of the rook using this lift to come in here to the 7th rank. But now we're combining that by opening up more targets first so that when that rook arrives on said rank, we have the counterplay we need.
Right, and black can actually force a draw here.
I was just about to show that line with this in here.
Oh, actually, rook c6. So rook c6
might
might be a way to might be a way to play on because
look,
if you go king d8 for black, your rook's stuck. You're just
don't
frozen.
want that. Although I'm not even threatening things like unwinding because if I ever get there, I just lose. Okay, so very interesting. So maybe there is no forced draw, but that means I may have to commit to this line that we looked at earlier. Are you taking a7 first?
He went c4 in the game, by the way.
Ooh, and Fabi instantly plays king e8. Notice who's trying to put the other person under pressure now. It says 15 minutes for 13 moves, Magnus. I'm going to make you have to figure this one out under time pressure. Look at that. Move 27, again, as a reminder of the format for everyone who may or may not just be tuning in. The first time control is reset at move 40. So you can see right there the third bullet point. The time control is 100 minutes for the first 40 moves, and then you get 50 minutes for the next 20 moves, and you can continue to read what's on the screen, so I don't have to. And but the point is, that's why Robert and I keep highlighting this 13 moves for 15 minutes, because that's the first kind of promised land you want to reach, is move 40, give yourself some breathing room. Magnus is going to need that, as he only has 15 minutes right now to find his next 13 moves.
And he just made a bunch, actually. A series of moves have been played.
We're back on the board here. Analysis, and so c4 was played, so forget our rook lift idea.
Yep.
And a6, and c5.
So he's just going for c takes b6.
This is the line we looked at.
I know, but he's going for this a7. He's
just going to go for it, but he's fighting for
rook
a draw
b6.
here.
I think he'll make it, but yes, he's definitely fighting.
Okay, he has to play f4. That's key. You want to stop e5.
You smart man.
Look at me learning.
When have I ever said that?
Suddenly, I don't know, how did, who's here today?
Yeah.
Danny Rensch or Dvoretsky?
Yeah.
Rook-ending master.
One day together, and now second day you're just...
What's going on? No, but this is key, because I highlighted the main point is that white can't just sit, because black is threatening e5 and king e6, and that's why f4 is so important. Okay, and in fact, that might just be the draw. In fact, look, it's happening. Because what's going to happen here is
G5
Caruana is going to commit to this idea, but the more pawns you trade, the less winning chances black has. Right? Remember, we highlighted that if this pawn falls, now you have healthy winning chances 4-on-3. But if you have to start trading pawns in order to win that pawn, whether it's g5 or f6, this is going to be much harder to win.
In fact, this is we're already in theoretical draw territory.
Okay, so there you go. And you commented yesterday about the table base being something that a lot of top players use in their preparation. Just it's such a practical advantage just to know.
King g2.
Wait, he played king g2?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, it's on the board already. King g2.
Wow.
e5.
Yeah, of course e5. And Fabiano plays it instantly.
What? How did Magnus not play f4? And
maybe he'll play it now.
You can take it and play g5.
No, but so f4.
You're going to sack it?
Oh, actually, maybe this isn't.
I have
good.
e4.
Well, e4.
Also to consider.
Yeah, I don't like this.
The eval bar just sort of slipped a little bit more toward black's advantage, too. Look, now he's just giving up the d pawn.
So he's just saying that this is a theoretical
is a draw. I am shocked by this decision, and I think we are going to have a game to go over now.
Oh, actually, he just did something maybe smart. Rook b5.
Okay, let's go to the game.
Wait, rook b4?
b4 takes.
Okay, f4.
Oh, he's just going to force the trade this way?
Yes.
And now we're in a 3-on-2.
Yes. And the 3-on-2 is a theoretical draw. Yes, it's same as yesterday.
But hold on. I'm not going to do it. I'm going to play this.
And then you can't take on d6 because I have rook b6 check. So king g3.
But I have f6.
So king g3. King g4. King f5.
Wait. I have this.
King h5. But maybe you go rook a2 and just start coming after my pawns. Not ideal. Not ideal. But no, I think that here...
But I hear you. Now we're analyzing it. We're trying to keep up with Magnus's ideas.
And g5 you can go h4, actually. That's also...
that's the other idea. But again, if g5, h4... okay. This
check.
is...
Rook b6. No.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, duh.
So, take. Now, this is... it's not the easiest 3-on-2 draw in the world, but this is definitely... should be a draw based on best play from white. But not the position you want to get.
Not the position you want at all. And let's back up to not because I'm, f5.
So he's going for it.
This is such a funny moment where you and I just seem unable to properly predict their moves, but it may not be because the best moves are being played. This is an interesting approach from Magnus, especially when it seemed like there was a much more logical way to try to slow down black's potential winning chances.
So what about f4?
F4 is going to be met by e4.
Okay, so let's put it on the board. So f4, e4 can go f3.
But now you've exposed the second rank in a way that is not such an easy draw in those positions. This isn't just...
Oh, you're true. Rook a2 check. Actually, if my king goes up to g3...
Oh, you actually just win on the spot because you have this.
That's frustrating.
And, let me... What?
I was going to say, can I try to go king f1 instead of king to g3?
Ooh, no. I mean, there's just too much here.
But g7's falling? Like, I'm trying to just trade off as many pawns as possible.
But let's highlight that comment I just made there because I think that's actually more instructive for members trying to learn from this moment. That one of the things that Robert and I just recognize is Yes, there's often easy draws when you have 2 versus 3 that are healthy, and even 2 versus 3 that are kind of split, like Robert's trying to trade. But one of the things that you can know is that what you always want is this: you want the pawn exposing the second rank where it is, and you want this pawn leading the way to sort of offer trades and keep things at bay. The moment you open up access points to your king in these types of rook endings, you almost always drastically increase the winning chances. And one instructive reason for that, use your imagination, is that let's say these pawns are traded. At some point in the lines, if the king gets forward, there's always kinds of threats of rook trades because you've opened up a potential for an exchange or trade. And the king and pawn ending is just always winning because if you take the rooks off the board, black has 3 versus 2. So, a little bit of imaginary chess there, but trying to give everybody in chat kind of the bigger picture, the forest through the trees. Why are we saying that there are winning chances there? That's why. So you have to be careful in defending rook endings if you ever expose a second or third rank to checks.
Right.
So, all right, back to what I just wanted to highlight that. So Fabiano has played F5 and Magnus is thinking.
So F4, that has to be the move. You can keep your position in status quo, but F4, like if you go F4 here, and that sort of forces black. You don't want to capture it. That was a 3-on-2 that white would like to get into. So after F4, E4, maybe I can just go H4. And my idea now.
So this is more appropriate of an ideal defensive setup, like we were saying. Keep the second rank closed.
You'll take my pawn.
Obviously.
I'll go H5.
You'd like that, wouldn't you?
And I'm just trying to make sure that you can't maneuver too much because
it's interesting, actually.
The only way for black, maybe black is rook A3 to F3 at some point. Not now, because rook A3, I'll go rook B7.
But this is a good point to highlight for the members. That's your idea. Okay.
Yeah, this is.
There are winning chances here, legit.
But
now, it doesn't mean it's not going to be a draw, but
where does black's king go? That's the real problem, because your king needs to protect G7.
Well, I could ultimately tuck it all the way in.
But as soon as you do that, you can't protect F5 with your king.
Right, but I think we just have to time it right. So H5 is played. Let's say I play here immediately.
Okay, I'll go rook.
I think you should just go in.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, that's actually looking kind of irritating.
Let's go back.
Okay, so sorry, I can't do that. So what if I'm all in? What if I go for your idea?
Rook B7. I'm taking G7. I'm taking H6.
I wonder, is that actually this type of endgame where I can?
Even if I didn't have my H pawn, it's still a draw.
Okay, you're right.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. I was imagining something where I got counterplaying this pawn was good, but of course you don't even need it. You can just leave it. Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, so Magnus goes back to B6.
Yep.
Here comes King E6. I'm imagining this was kind of the whole point of moving the F and E pawn as we first entered this position back here. We were talking about we want to move the F and E pawn to get here, and that's why I anticipated King E6, and looks like it was already played. Okay, so King E6. Now, the threat is rook to D7 and then taking this pawn safely. That's exactly what Fabiano wants to do.
So maybe this is a better way for white to do this. H4 now.
Rook D7.
And then can I go H5? Although maybe you don't take it. Maybe you go King F6.
But even this, I go King F6 next, and now you've extended your pawn a little far. Because you don't have F4.
That is true.
You need F4.
I do. Well, I played it before.
You need it.
Maybe F4. I can go F4 now as well. So if I go F4 and you take, then I have King F3. No, I don't. Because you just bring your rook down to A2 maybe. Things are getting suspicious here. Okay, now I D7 check. It actually should let me survive. Now black is left with ugly pawns. Wow, this is...
Yeah, I mean, that
so
should
he went
work.
D7. He actually sacrificed the pawn immediately.
So he must be planning on playing rook G6 and then has something up his sleeve on King E8.
Maybe H4, H5. But no, I don't like this. It's a worse version of what feels like he could have had. Because now rook A.
Well, especially because I can even go here.
Yeah?
Yeah, you don't want that. I might even play F4 and just force you to trade. This is surprisingly, and again, it's we're a little bit, I don't know, maybe we're jumping the gun a little bit, but feels like surprisingly rushed defensive technique from Magnus.
I still think he's holding the F4 move. Like the F4 is a good inclusion for white.
Yeah, it was a good inclusion.
And it still is possible.
Okay, he needs to play it before it's too late.
If I go F4 and you take, I have this King F3 move.
And this is, we're highlighting this because we keep pointing out that if black is winning that pawn safely and then keeping the 4-on-3, with nothing else having changed here, that's a problem. So white has to do something to change the nature of this, and you don't want to allow f4 by black in some positions where now, if I can do this and everybody is safe, you've got some weaknesses that are really stuck.
Right. And f4 is just, trying to get rid of your ugly double pawns and also gaining some space in the position. So f4 here, we keep talking about how taking it is not possible. Or that's not possible. It's possible, of course, but it's not a good decision. And so f4, e takes, we just always have this king f3 move. And it's important to note that g5 would protect the f4 pawn, but you lose the base pawn. And then that's going to be a problem for black to continue.
Okay, so let's go back to f4, because I'm a little skeptical that Magnus is just out of the woods yet. Yep. So f4, say I play e4
h4.
again.
Immediately.
So you're back to your idea here.
And the big problem is the king can't protect all the pawns at the same time because I have a million checks as white.
Okay,
h5.
hold on. Not sure I agree.
Okay. Yeah. So I'll go
that's my idea.
Rook b5. Okay, rook b6 check. Rook b7. Rook a7.
But I've done it. I've gotten my defense in.
Right, but your rook can't get active. That's the big problem.
So
give you a million
the
check.
question is, can I get away with this? That'll be the question.
Right, and then I have to take the en passant.
And now you've got to deal with this and this idea.
Yeah, that's a good. This is a good question.
So this is just almost always there's some way to wiggle when your opponent doesn't have the perfect type of defensive structure, right? Imagine this pawn is here. That's our healthy scenario. So I really feel like this has been a rushed approach, and I was shocked when we entered this endgame and Magnus didn't make more of an effort to prevent this expansion. So I mean, we'll see if and what is up Magnus's defensive sleeve here.
Yeah, he'll need to hold this, and this is a harder defense than Fabiano's task was yesterday in the endgame.
Yeah.
Like once they got to the
Fabiano
endgame,
should have lost earlier.
Right.
But in the endgame, Fabiano's defensive task was easier than what Magnus may have ahead of him right now.
Right.
And he's already played rook b5, and king to e6 is on the board. So... Wow, rook b6 check and then king f7. Just, it feels a little sloppy for white.
Yes.
Like, look at the last several moves. I mean, we just got rook moves and checks, and I'm wondering that I was worried when we entered this, Robert, that I would have time to deal with all these and then get a position like this.
Right.
Right?
Maybe.
So everything we said has happened. We've had the 3 pawns white had traded for black's 2, and there's no way black isn't playing for a win here for some time to come.
But maybe white just does nothing. Maybe he's my pawn structure is actually pretty nice here. It's ugly, but you can't infiltrate. Let's just shuffle the rook.
Okay.
Yeah, actually,
every day we shuffle him.
It's a good question.
Notice I'm pulling Nakamura number 11, looking up into the clouds.
It's a good question though. How does black make progress? Let's let black do everything that you want to do, within reason.
No, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do what I want to do.
So I'll go put my rook over. Just continue. I'll move my rook down one. I'll keep moving my rook just forever.
So again, okay, yes, but this is going to be pushed. Maybe Magnus just knows that this is a draw.
Right.
And again, you and I are looking at this as it's not the healthiest type of 3-on-2, so we're more... Maybe he just knows... I mean, not a surprise he knows more rook endings than we do, but maybe he just knows that it's fine.
Yeah.
I'm not as confident just because I'm thinking, not just as a commentator, but from the practical perspective of time, somebody pushes you. How many of us have lost drawn endings to Georgian Grandmasters? Raise your hand. Come on.
I haven't played that many Georgian Grandmasters. How even...
Georgi Kachishvili.
Yeah?
I think you lost the net game to one time. Should have drawn.
You're just making it up, but okay, I'll raise my hand. You just don't want to be left alone.
Anyway, the point is, you lose endgames that are draws when you add elements like time pressure and the practical nature of the game. So these guys are the best in the world because they're not as affected by those practical factors, but we are all human beings, and that's kind of something I would predict. That was pretty funny. You were like, it was like leaving me hanging, like up top.
Yeah, and I was like,
up top.
I was like, I don't know you.
I don't know you, right?
I'm going away.
Well, we probably are going to have a bit of a think now, given that Magnus has a critical decision to make. Can he just do, the dad bod shuffle here from now until Kingdom Come and say, I really don't think you have enough, or is he going to go for one of your earlier suggested plans to be more aggressive and proactive in his defense? But we're going to take a quick break. Wait a second. Rook b6, king's getting active.
But the king can only go so far. King f4, you give a check, and that's what white wants, right?
But it's good timing because it's we have just crossed time control.
Yeah.
Both sides have been given 50 extra minutes on the clock. You can now see Magnus back over an hour. And because we are in for a nightcap here, a long, I don't know, what do you do? We're going to be right back in just a few moments. Don't go anywhere as the rook ending goes on and Fabiano Caruana tries to pull a Magnus and grind out and win an endgame that maybe he's not supposed to.
Chess.com is about playing. At any moment, there are thousands of people from around the world playing on Chess.com. So whether you're a total beginner or a grandmaster, you'll find a game quickly with someone at your level. You can play at any pace, from 1-minute bullet to 5-minute blitz to 60-minute games. Or you can play more relaxed games where you have several days to make your move. There are tournaments starting every few minutes, or you can play against our customizable coaching computer. Chess.com is for learning. Chess isn't just about playing, it's about getting better. Chess.com puts the best training tools at your fingertips. Sharpen your game with over 50,000 tactics puzzles. Improve your strategy with training videos by top grandmasters. Get instant feedback after your games with real-time computer analysis. Regardless of where you're at now, you can take your game to the next level. Chess.com is for sharing. Join the community where you can discuss chess ideas in the forums and follow the latest chess news. Or join a club with friends and play in a league against other clubs. You can find all this in your browser at home and at work. or on the go with your phone or tablet. Signing up is free and easy. So what are you waiting for? Enjoy your game.
And a lot of action has happened now over the last few moments. We appreciate you giving us just a couple of seconds for Robert to grab a Snickers. This guy, he becomes real feisty, real diva when he's hungry. So this guy's got a little bit of crumbs. Now he's had his chance to get some food, and we're going to be with you for the long haul because it looks like Fabiano Caruana has gotten himself a position that he thinks he can push a little bit. So Magnus still playing very quickly, very confidently, like he kind of knew what was going to happen here. We're going to back up on the analysis board here to the position that we kind of left you with, which of course was that Magnus was kind of playing tickle here with the rook, but kept playing fast, even at the turn to time control. And as Fabiano tried to activate his king, he just stuck with it. And again, I think his instincts were correct that he just felt like Magnus just feels like he has some position in mind that he just feels like he knows is a draw. And because he's not even using that extra 50 minutes at all at this point. He gave check again. Fabiano knows that he can't just go back, or he might as well just shake hands now with a peaceful result. So he plays e4 after takes. Note, there is no f3 trying to use a pin, Robert. I know how much you love the pin emote, but that's a bad idea.
Because the king has to go away from the protection of that square.
That's right. So, sorry, I guess I should have said that, right? F takes, f3. The point is the check would force the king back. But h3 was played by Magnus. Rook a5. And what I find interesting here, again, the player's just playing so fast, Robert, right after time control. Nobody is taking the time that I would often recommend to my students. If I was in a position like this and analyzing one of my students' games afterwards, I would say, hey, when you pass time control, that's a moment to take a breath, use the time on your clock to make sure that, what did we say yesterday, find your forever draw position, find your forever hold, like, hey, this is something I know I can draw. Maybe Magnus has that in his head, but usually you want to use the extra time you get at time control to make sure you're not making any mistakes in that regard, right? That the position you envision as a draw really is a draw by really trying to think ahead, get yourself deep down the road where you consider all the tricks your opponent's going to try in advance before time pressure hits. Magnus playing so fast here, like he just knows it's a draw anyway.
And I think that's what I was about to say, is he studied so much chess.
He just knows.
And this, if we go back just a couple moves to where we were before, like the 4 pawns and against the 3, the rook and 4 pawns, like where we left off before the break. Like, stop here. We see that the pawn structure, and we've made comments about how it's an ugly pawn structure for white. There's double pawns that are isolated. But this is actually quite a standard-looking study position for a strong player. You say, okay, I need to make sure that if I get into a position like this, I know how to hold, if it's a holdable position. The reason why, because if you're worse earlier in the game, like Magnus was, he traded down into this position.
Right. He invited it.
Exactly, and all that study, all that preparation led him to know that here, once I get this, I'm going to make an easy draw. Yep. And that allows him to play a little more quickly. So as we go forward with the game, as if you had to trade one pair of pawns, which is not what black wanted in that position, but kind of had to, and as we get catch up to the live position, look how active white's pieces have become. So, with the rook on b7 in the end here, that black is tied down to the pawn on g7. You can't move your king any further. If you go king f3, go rook f7 check. In fact, that's almost checkmate, funnily enough.
Not quite, but yes.
If you go e3 for black, then you're offering an exchange of another important pawn. But
also there's these checks here, right?
Well, even better would be rook f7 check, just forcing either your king onto the e file, or you're going to lose your g7 pawn. So...
Right.
Yeah, here after rook g6.
So what you're saying is, yes, like the kind of advice we would give to students about time management, make sure you are properly visualizing the position you think you can hold is still true, but Magnus is just that good and already knows that this is a draw. And you made an interesting comment that I think is true about how these guys study chess, and I've been asked that, like, how do the best players in the world continue to get better? A lot of opening prep, but also that is the kind of exercise they do. Robert just said that. That's not like a made-up thing to say that what a trainer does, because who's better than Magnus Carlsen at chess? Like, nobody, right?
Nobody. Well, but maybe Fabiano Caruana will argue.
We're going to find out, right? But let's just, for what I'm saying is, these guys don't have players around them who are better than them, but what their trainers are doing is putting them in positions that are of practical use.
Yes.
And saying, okay, when you get this, now defend this against me. I'm a really strong grandmaster too, and now you got to be worse in a rook ending. And so, anybody ever wondering what are the insights of how these guys train? That is a very common thing. They'll give them positions where they're slightly worse, give them positions where they're almost lost, but there is one way to draw. Like, that's how you help these guys get better. Put them in a scenario like this and say, now defend. And I think Robert may be right. Maybe that's just how confident Magnus is, and that's why he's playing as fast as he is here. Because he just knows that he's in a theoretically drawn position. I mean, I'm still not closing the book yet.
I've closed it.
You've closed it?
Yeah.
Like, how hard did you close it? Like, did you do that like slam?
Page 237.
Just 237. You just like
done.
Like leather-bound books closure?
Yeah. And the big problem here for black is the rook on b4 pins that pawn. Now rook b7 back, and the only way after rook g5 you can go rook b7. I'm just gonna keep going back and forth.
Yeah.
And now after rook to b7, you can't push into your pawns, really. And if you start trading even more pawns, actually, let's go rook to b7.
Okay.
And the question is, let's start moving our h and g pawns. Let's go h5, just for, And I go rook b4.
If I sit tight.
I can just sit tight. And you move your rook away from g5, so you can push your g pawn. Let's go rook a5. I can always go promote my king back to g2, if I want. King g2. So if you go rook g5, we're back at the same position. If you go rook a2... We've been here before, right? If you go rook a2, the edge go rook c4. I keep your pawn pinned. And if you go g5...
And the point is, you would never want to back up the king here because you don't want to allow any kind of progress, even if it's not a threat.
Right.
But, so once you've got the king on g2, you like the idea of just sitting tight.
Yep. And g5, I can even go rook c3. That way you can't push your pawns. If you go g4, I just take it. Yep. And I'm happy to start trading these pawns. And say that, look at my rook, it's covering the third rank. You can't actually make any progress. I only have one pawn left, and I have two. You can't attack it again. Because the only way to attack would be somehow to get your king involved, but that's way too far away. So, it looks like he's holding with ease at this point right now.
In fact, I think we're almost about to get...
They drew.
Oh, it's over.
You know what's great about that? Does you're set up a soccer game that we can... make now?
Sure does.
Warner, if you're watching this.
Yeah, I guess to go to soccer. There you go. And I'm also the assistant coach, much hated by the main coach because I'm pretty much never there. So that's the other, it's for Warner, but also to save face with my buddy.
And I think, should we talk about why they agreed to a draw
Yeah,
here?
let's do that. Let's absolutely talk about it. It's a much faster game than Game 1, everyone. So if somehow you just tuned in 2 seconds ago, it's official. Game 2 is a peaceful result. A draw is in the books. And Fabiano Caruana, we'll get into exactly what this means for how well he rebounded in terms of preparation in a second. But Robert is going to help explain why they repeated here and why that's a draw.
Yeah, and it was kind of along the lines of what we were just looking at, where if black tried to make progress, you're actually just whittling down into known, theoretically drawn territory.
Right.
We're actually approaching a position where you can put in the database. There are too many pieces on the board right now.
Just barely. One.
Barely.
Yeah.
They have table bases that you can look and see. With every move possible, is that move going to be a draw?
Right.
Now, this position has been studied by both Caruana and Carlsen.
Yep.
And advice to everyone: I would play this game out. Maybe not against the world champion because I know that he knows how to hold this, and he's done a great job of proving that. But in a regular game, in a regular tournament, I would play this out pretty much against anyone because
I'm even surprised Fabiano didn't because I feel like. Okay, here's the difference between how these two games finished. Yesterday, and maybe it's because of a little bit of the emotional hangover that Magnus had from knowing he missed a win, he pushed on in a position that was just as easy of a draw for much longer than Fabiano just did here.
Right.
So what does that say about these two players? I think on the one hand, it says Fabiano, I think, really does consider this a breath of fresh air game. Okay, I should have lost game 1, but now I'm back. I just prepared totally good stuff, right? And basically drew putting in no effort in this game.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously, if you were here earlier, he was up more than an hour on the clock, up on the clock to end the game. So I guess Fabiano's attitude is, look, I'm here to stay, Magnus. You're not going to put me away. But Magnus would have pushed this position on his black.
He would. And he did yesterday something similar. And I think that I wouldn't. Some may say that's a sign of weakness from Fabiano's point of view. I don't agree. I think that he knows this position is so basic at their level, not at everyone's level, and for reasons that we can continue to explain and have explained. That with that preparation, that foresight, that knowledge, they know that this game is going to peter out and draw. And I think that takes us back several moves. And I think what Magnus said was a very good practical decision that at first we were a bit confused about because before he traded all the queenside pawns, something that we talked about.
Which position?
Let's go back to before c5, move 28, let's say, or 26, something like this.
So we'll go back to move 26. Okay.
Right. And we got to this position, and we immediately assessed king f8, king e8, king d7. That's what black is going to do. We knew that. And what we asked of the audience was to envision the future that you want. And we talked exactly about this. You lose those 3 queenside pawns for white. You get the 2 queenside pawns for black. And that should be good drawing chances. We said that black also can try to play for win, but if you know your stuff, you're going to be holding this as well. And I think Magnus did a perfect job from there because he said, in this line we had talked about way before they even played it, as they were thinking.
He was ready to force the pieces off the board. I mean, we analyzed this. We were predicting this back in, back in this position.
Right.
I mean, and that's not any credit. We were just, going forward with what seemed to be the most logical, straightforward path. But we predicted there that, okay, if Fabiano could get this pawn safely, maybe there was winning chances because of the crippled pawn structure. But, again, a good lesson for us. I mean, this is why it's kind of really enjoyable, this high-level chess. I just learned something, honestly, like evaluating just how easily Magnus drew this one. We are all now better chess players. Right. Because if you look at this position and realize I was analyzing, I don't want to say panic moves, but moves that I felt prevented black from getting the plan that we thought he needed. And Magnus said, wait, everybody. I'll feed you baby birds.
Yep.
Right? Magnus was mother bird today. And he fed all of us some knowledge. And and he just said, look, you don't got to worry, baby birds. Just sit tight. I got you.
And that's actually a great demonstration because many players...
He literally just sat there with the rook.
Right. Many players will freak out and start making more active moves, trying to take an approach that gives them more dynamic chances to hold. But this is actually a great...
Magnus literally only moved the king and the pawn when he had to.
Yes.
When there were checks.
Yes.
Right? And I think you're right. We should highlight again. So the king is not threatening to come forward for a number of reasons, but most simply, white can push it back. The rook is either going to be stuck to g6 or the g file if the white rook comes around, or if it tries to get too frisky over here, white will just change positions of the king and now go back to the square it was on just to keep the king out.
Right.
So again, and as Robert highlighted so well, like even if, let's say we get some position, I'm not even going to make like super accurate moves, I just want to get to that position again. Robert highlighted so well that even if you get this position with the rook on the 7th rank, and we get all these moves, you're not threatening anything. Right, you're just not threatening anything. Yeah. At the right moment, notice I stayed on the 4th rank the whole time because that prevents you from getting a move like e3, #pin emote. But as soon as you are actually threatening to do something on the 3rd rank for the pin, white can move the rook back, and Bob's your uncle.
And
there's no progress.
Let's just show 2 more moves that I think are important. Rook e2 for black. Okay. First, I can go king f1 and just kick your rook away.
Right, but
let's say go rook a3, e3, and I just take it.
Trade, because this is a drawn king upon ending. And one way you can know as a beginner chess player, okay, there are some exceptions to this, but one very quick way, because we want those kind of tips that help us in our own games to make decisions under time pressure. It's easy for all of us to say we're king and pawn masters when it's in a study situation, but if you got 5 seconds on the clock, are you making the right decision in a king and pawn ending? And I think that one thing that Robert is highlighting there that's so good is he knows instantly it's a drawn king and pawn ending. Why? Because his king is established in front of the enemy pawn.
Yep.
And that's something that basically kills your opponent's winning chances. And so for you to know in your own games that are maybe it's a knight ending, maybe it's a bishop ending, and you're trying to calculate, is that a good trade for me? That's a quick way to know. Has your king gotten in front of the enemy passed pawn? If it has, most likely it's a draw there because you're preventing those opposition things. I'll actually just set it up here. You have a position like this and white does something, okay, again, easy draw. King comes up. But if you get a position where your opponent's king is in front of the pawn, now it's lost. Yeah. Because in these positions, black will get opposition and you'll have to move, even if they move to the side. The timing works out that you lose. But if you can always keep your king in front of the pawn, as Robert quickly recognized might happen here, you're never in a situation where you're worried about losing a king and pawn ending. So, okay, providing a little bit of last-minute instructive takeaways, just so that everybody feels pretty happy about the fact that they really didn't entertain us as well as they did yesterday. Trying to keep you happy. It's their fault. They didn't play as crazy of a game. But before we let you go, a lot of you have been involved in our daily question contest for the chance to win a Diamond membership. We're going to announce that right now. I'm not even sure who won it, but I'm told that we're going to be giving that away.
Boom.
Looks like the Caruana in a Tesla. I'm not sorry. I want to give a Diamond membership. Our producer here, Arn, let's make sure the kid gets a Diamond membership. Honestly, there were so many good Photoshops. Even the car Tesla, I think, was great.
That was great.
Let's go Oprah today. Let's be generous with our Diamond membership giveaways, but that's pretty awesome stuff.
Yep.
And I think it's a good way to bring it to a close. We asked for you to give us a CAR, a car, because they both have the word car in their name. Our player's in a car, and
I don't know where you're going with that one.
That's where Photoshop happens. Fabiano was in a Tesla.
That's true.
So, but remind everybody one last time while we have you that if you like what you see right here, the show ended much more quickly today. I'm sure we got many great battles in store during the month of November. You will have many opportunities to click that merch button, whether you're watching at Chess TV or Twitch TV/Chess. Get yourself a mug, and I'm going to try to get Robert one before
Monday when round 3 is?
Before Monday. We have a break. Enjoy the rest day recap video, actually by Grandmaster Yasser Seirawan. Definitely something that we should be talking about. There's our score. There you have it. But remember that for our Chess.com premium members only, Grandmaster Yasser Seirawan will be providing his combined highlight video. Games 1 and 2 will be combined into a single video found at Chess.com. We will also have a daily recap video by Grandmaster Yermolinsky coming to YouTube and Twitch and Facebook very shortly. But there you go. There you see Yasser. He's going to be combining games into a video. You will also find Yermo's analysis very quickly. And you'll find us on Monday. Rob and I are going to go to a soccer game. Going to drag him along, dad duties, bringing him to all kinds of stuff. I'm making you do stuff while you're here with me.
It's my pleasure.
And just got to make sure that somebody's got to help Hazel with her homework. Anyway, thank you everybody who's here. Thanks to all of our moderators, the one, the only Chess Bay, all of our producers behind the scenes, Aaron, and the entire team, making sure that things go as smoothly as possible. Thanks to our guests, Bruce Pandolfini. We want to make sure we also thank Coffee and Tea, our two mods that are here nonstop, and they go together like
coffee and tea.
Coffee and tea.
But they don't really go together.
What else goes together? Well, like cake and ice cream.
Bread and butter.
What?
Bread and butter.
Fat kid loves cake.
Oh, okay.
I
think it's time.
I think it's time. Time to check out. Again, credits will be rolling here very soon. Thank you for being here. Stick around after you enjoy the credits so you can see who subscribed today, who donated. We appreciate all of them. And then we'll be sending you over to the Chess Bras. Enjoy their post-game party. And we will see all of you on Monday. Take care, everyone.